Two, hello. Two. Check two, hello. Are you there? Are there, friends? Sorry for audio only, gang. I went live a moment ago, but I was just eating a sandwich. Was having a few little bites. Just having a few little bites of the sandwich. Hoagies, cool sunglasses, fierce bisexual lighting, and, as you pointed out, Barry. A good friend to talk you through all this while stuffing cold cuts in his mouth. If that's something, if all those things are things that you look for in a stream, well, you've come to the right place. These are the things I have to offer in abundance. These are the only things I look for. Good. Blundered hope. I'm happy to hear that. I refuse to watch any stream without cold cuts or bisexual lighting. Luckily, you qualify. Good. Happy to hear that. I couldn't hear Rob this whole time. Thought he was muted, but was the muter has become the mutee, I guess. Dr. Maggot. Now you're the muted one. Didn't have time to watch the entire gaming VOD. Did fix the lag problems. Impossible to watch Fortnite like that. Yeah, I think once I minimized my preview screen, it worked better. It still wasn't my best showing. Towards the end there, I had a pretty nice one, but it wasn't my best outing. Lucy Vert, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It was a good run. And then, of course, I played Carrion for a little while as well. I played Carrion, which I played a bunch over the last couple of weeks, but never streamed. That was fun. Eating some people. Eating some scientists. That was good. I guess I should just get more in the habit of just because I do game, I game a little bit. Get in the habit of just turning on the camera when I'm doing that. It's weird, despite being a Twitch streamer for my literal job, I still haven't quite figured this shit out. This sandwich is pretty good, but I only had sweet pickles. And we don't need to relitigate the whole sweet pickle controversy, Sometimes I think a sweet pickle is nice. I think I wanted just a regular, a garlicky dill on this one. I think I probably would have preferred that. Still pretty good. What do we think about the daytime increased lighting situation? What do we think? Is it working for you, chat? The daytime lighting upgrade? PM true. I have this increased. This light here. No, I bought a couple weeks ago a sunset lamp. One of those sunset lamps you see like on Instagram. I got one of those. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And then I put it on here the other day and I was like, ooh.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Resistance is justified when people are occupied. Resistance is justified when people are occupied. Resistance is justified when people are occupied.
Oh. Thank you, Old Dutch, for 33 months tier 2 and everything you've done for the community. Couldn't agree more. Resistance justified when people are occupied. Of course, that resistance constitutes voting. If you resist through your voting, then totally justified. Anything beyond that, makes me a little uncomfortable. As a comfortable white Western person, it makes me a little uncomfortable when we go beyond that. That makes it tricky for me to talk about how I think it's good at dinner parties and everything. It creates uncomfortable social and career situations for me. So that's when that gets to be a bit of a problem, unfortunately. If you fight back, it just makes you just as bad as them. That's exactly right. Thank you. Will Stancil. I had never heard of this Will Stancil guy until like this year. And I feel like this year he decided he was going to become the Bidenomics guy. Like, what was this guy doing before? I swear I'd never followed him. I had never seen one of his tweets before. Before this year, he just started talking about like how Bidenomics were just so great. And that people caring about their quality of life is really like just Twitter, like leftist podcast Twitter discourse or whatever. And that actually wages for working class people have gone up. Like actually all the people that thought that people at Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever other service industry jobs should make more money, now all of a sudden they're making more money and everyone's complaining. It turns out you didn't even want that. Because the only way that they can ever make more money is if the cost of every single other item in their lives goes up proportionally. That's the only way. That's the only way you can ever raise anyone's wages. And then when they raise they're not allowed to complain anymore. You thinking rent is increased is a delusion, actually. Rent and everything else as well. Sean? Okay, everybody. Warm up. It's time to warm up. Are you ready for this? Ba 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 ba. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sean. A happy birthday to you. There you go. There you go. You wanted acknowledgement, didn't you? That's what you wanted. That's what you wanted. Well, there you go. There you go, Sean. Are you happy? Are you happy now? The entire restaurant is looking at you. There you go. That's right. Everyone's favorite social situation. Plum tree. That's good. Just under the table with happiness. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Ugh. The people on Twitter claiming that it's fine that prices are increasing because the workers at these places are getting paid more are wild. How are all these companies posting record profits if all of this price increase is due to workers getting paid more? It's a good question. It's a very good question. I don't know. I wish I had the answer for you. I don't know if Trump was president right now or whatever Republican and this is what the economy was. I don't know if these same people would be bending over backwards to make all these arguments about how the economy is actually great. I really don't. My working pay went up, but also my taxes to the state and Fed, and also all the things that I have to pay for, my groceries and my rent. Good. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you, Grandpa Brandon. Hey, Husker, how's it going? Husker's got some spicy noodles. I love that. They're scolding people like, you wanted a $15 minimum wage. This is what happens. Complete morons. Yeah, it's just like it's that argument of like, oh, you want to pay for $12 for a Big Mac? Like that's just taken as a given that when you're one of these massive food conglomerates, if you're going to pay your workers more, all your products are going to increase in price. And that's like a law of science. It's just like a law of science for that. It's as law as much as gravity is a law, you know? I would simply say to these like business owners, don't inflate the prices. No, but we're paying our workers more, so we need to, and it's like, no, I got that first part. Yeah, but we're not doing the second part. Just don't inflate it. Just don't inflate. Just make less money. Just have your workers make more money and you pay for that rather than like the customers or rather than anything else. How about that? You make less. That's what I would say personally. Just make less money. That's what I would say to like the CEOs of Starbucks and McDonald's and Burger King and KFC and Subway and whatever else. As much as I love to shit on my own country, McDonald's workers are treated much better here in Denmark than in the USA, and our Big Mac price signifier is cheaper here. I mean, these big companies operating in places that have stricter labor laws is just examples that all this stuff is bullshit. All these rules, these supposed rules and laws of economics. We can't give our workers a union. We can't give them health care. We can't give them dental care.
You can count on me.
We can't pay them a living wage.
Good old Rob to talk you through all this.
You can.
Almost the start of the new year, old friend. I wonder what new horror will be reborn this coming year and how much more we can take.
Johnny, thanks very much for 6 months of tier 1. And what a happy message of hope. What a positive, optimistic message heading into the new year. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, of course we want everyone's wages to go up, especially the working class people that are doing important jobs like working in fast food restaurants or whatever else they're doing in the service industry or like whatever other industries where a lot of the people that are doing the most important work, grocery store workers, you know, the checkout people and the stocking, shelf stocking people. But we want them to make more wages, but we accept this totally false premise that has to mean some kind of like downstream economic consequence like inflation. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. But the free market, we don't have a free market. We don't live in a free market at all. The state can just say, pay them more money. Just fix the prices of both rent and goods. No, unless you're a doctor or police, you should barely be able to survive on your paycheck. That's right. That's when you know the economy's really cooking. Don't understand how we're not on a ridiculous depression. This economy doesn't even make sense. Everything is expensive. Rent is high. Homelessness up 12%. Just housing alone should cause a crash. Nothing about it makes sense. I agree. I mean, I've been thinking there was going to be the big cataclysmic crash that we're all expecting like 3 years ago. You know? At the start of the pandemic, I was like, oh shit, it's happening. It's happening. And they just keep kicking the can down the road. What if we just print trillions of dollars? You know? Maybe that's what caused inflation. Maybe that had something to do with it. You know? They printed trillions of dollars, but what they want to tell you is like, oh, that all went into like unemployment and child tax credit and transfer payments. No, it all went into just in being injected into the stock market to keep the whole thing going. That's where it went. And there being several times the number of empty homes versus the number of unhoused. Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely, everything is totally backwards. Hello, 27 Club. That's right. Yeah, just crank the money lever. Exactly. And then when they do give transfer payments and they do give unemployment and they do give child tax credit, then they're like, whoa, we got to take that away. We don't want to get people getting too used to that. Don't get too used to that. Don't get too comfortable with that. Don't also internalize the idea that we can just snap our fingers at any moment and just make your life easier. That the government can do that. As much as we say, oh, it's not possible because of gridlock and because of these economic rules and blah, 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 the parliamentarian. It turns out we can just snap our fingers and make everyone's lives better instantly at any time. And every single day we just choose not to. Don't internalize that. That's the biggest no-no. You can't ever understand that kind of basic concept. Like in Canada too, like we got those SURB payments in Canada if you qualified for those. And it was so easy. And everything's so complicated usually with the paperwork and the website, and you got to go to this website and you got to get your whatever. You got to jump through 50 hoops before you can like get access to maybe funding or whatever. And this was just a website that was just like, do you need money right now? If so, click yes. And you just clicked it and they're just like, here's money. And of course, for a lot of people, they just took it back. All the small businesses, they didn't take it back, but all the people that took money when they were $1 over the little means testing system they put up, they're like, oh, we're going to need that back actually. But of course, all the small businesses didn't have to think about that. No money left over for healthcare, but Israel gets billions unconditionally every year. Yeah, the healthcare in America, especially the healthcare system, that it costs more. It costs more than a public system. Just one sec. I'm gonna go just bring my plate over to the kitchen. It's the very knife. That's right. In Alberta, we have an insane surplus of money, but also child chemotherapy treatments are being postponed weeks due to understaffing. Meanwhile, we gave billions of dollars to Dow to open a carbon recapture facility. You know, a really good carbon recapture facility is this little thing called a forest. It turns out, actually, the carbon recapture facility was the friends we made along the way. This technology literally already exists. And it's free. Exactly. Don't worry, we're going to get on those. What did Trudeau said we were going to do? Like 1 billion trees? We're going to plant 1 billion trees? Sure. Maybe we're going to get on that soon. USA spends 12 times what Cuba spends, or Cuba spends 92% less, and so it's better outcomes. Really crazy how some people justify that. Yeah, for sure. And like, that's the big thing about American healthcare too, is because no one goes to the doctor because no one wants to go. So then all these things that they need to see a doctor for get worse, and then the outcomes are the health outcomes are worse, and it costs more to deal with the health outcomes because it's gotten to this bad point. So instead of just doing some minor preventative thing or some minor surgery, now you're doing chemo, now you're doing major surgery, now you're doing all these big serious procedures. So you're physically less healthy, and it costs more to do. It's just the worst way of doing anything. Or you have decent health care that's tied to your job, which you can, I guess, just lose at any time. That was you at the dentist today. I'm sorry to hear that, human person. I haven't been to the dentist for quite a while for that exact reason. Cuba has higher life expectancy than U.S. And, you know, amazingly, under Obama, you know, one of the only positive things you could point to about Obama's administration and foreign policy, especially, was moving towards normalization with Cuba. And now, the Brandon administration is not even considering removing Cuba from these state sponsors of terrorism list, which is a ludicrous thing to begin with. And they're not even considering it. They're not even considering moving towards any kind of normalization. Fucking Cuba. The states Cuba. What terror? Has anyone ever even explained that? What terrorism is Cuba sponsoring exactly? Have they ever explained that to anybody? Vote blue no matter who, though. And look, there's like statements going around from Donald Trump the other day, totally like genocidal fascist statements about immigrants from Donald Trump that he's saying, like really horrendous stuff, horrifying stuff, you know? And all these people are saying, like, look at what Trump's saying about immigrants. It's so scary. It's so dangerous. And Biden's right in the middle of trying to bend over backwards to make deals with Republicans that are basically carrying on all of Donald Trump's immigration policies and going even further in many cases. How are you going to use Trump's statements as like a whole vote blue no matter who thing when you've got Biden doing the exact same thing? You're going to talk about Donald Trump's Muslim ban while Joe Brandon is paying for and subsidizing a genocide of Palestinians right now? It's insane. They're like, yeah, the orange man is bad. How are you going to convince people of this fucking argument when all the things that you're going to point to about the orange man being bad is also being done by the blue guy? Immigrants are poisoning the blood of this country. Well, that's like no, but yes. Like that's the Democrat response. But like that's just it, right? It's like it's purely a difference in rhetoric. We just don't want you to say it. Just don't say it. Just don't say the words. Like, that's literally the only fucking difference. Just don't say the words. Do the thing, but just don't say the words. Just don't say it out loud. Or say it nicer. That's all it is. Maybe there's a few more differences you could look at. There's a few more differences you can look at, but primarily that's what it is, isn't it? Just don't say it. Just say it nicer. That's all they care about. It's just we want to keep the machine that runs on human beings and misery. We want to keep that going, the misery machine that we benefit from. Keep the misery machine going that feeds on human suffering, but just don't remind us of it. We just don't want to think about it. We don't want to think about the misery machine that runs on human suffering that subsidizes our nice lifestyles, okay? We just want to pretend that it's not there. When you start reminding us of that, you start talking about the misery machine, that makes us very uncomfortable. Then we get very upset. That means then we have to start pretending to care about like immigrants or to care about working people or Palestinians or whoever. Like, listen to any someone who, like, because it's not me. I know the broad strokes of some of these arguments, but follow people that intensely, closely follow immigration policy and listen to what they're saying about the difference between the Donald Trump administration and the Joe Biden administration when it comes to the treatment of immigrants and refugees. All the horrible policies that were instituted by Stephen Miller, except maybe the explicit policy of child separation, has continued, and now they're making a deal to make that more or less permanent. And they're not even protecting the dreamers, like the good immigrants that were supposed to be secure by now. The dreamers were supposed to be secure because of their give and take and finding a compromise, and their push and pull with the right. They were supposed to protect the dreamers, the good immigrants who have done nothing wrong, who came here as infants, who have never been to their home countries, who don't have a criminal record, and they have jobs and they have careers, and now they're not even safe anymore either. Also, and this deal they're making about immigration, is it so they can fund more unemployment? Is it that they can pay back? Is it they can decrease student debt? Is it they can fund healthcare? Is it so they can fund housing? No, it's so they can make a deal to send billions of dollars to Ukraine and Israel. That's what they're making. That's this bargain that they're making, throwing immigrants into the just absolutely throwing them under the bus. That's the deal they're making, so they can send money to Ukraine and Israel, not so they can actually do anything that helps anybody. Which is ultimately just about enriching weapons contractors. Ukraine is really going to turn it around this time, I bet. Their new crop of fucking 17-year-olds and, middle-aged people, this new crop are really going to be able to get it together for them at the last minute, and they're going to turn things around. It is honestly so tragic how fucked Ukraine is now. And not even the Ukraine that's been in a war zone the last decade or so, but just the West Ukraine. Whatever Ukraine ends up looking like. It's going to be populated with so many people, so much fucking weapons, so many extremists that have a legitimate axe to grind now with their own government. The amount of chaos that's going to cause for the next generation is just so tragic to think about. And all the people that supported that, creating that exact situation under the guise that they were helping Ukraine. And all these people in the West that have no connection to it, they don't live there, they don't know anyone there. They just got caught up in this like Russia bad, protect Ukraine by arming Ukraine thing. They've helped create this situation. It's kind of a foreign policy MO. No, it exactly is. You destabilize, you fill a country with highly armed extremists, and then years later you go back to do the same thing again. Just insane. They've been having cope puff pieces on CBC about they're turning to AI to fill roles at an increasing pace. And also it's more opportunities for women. Oh, good. We support women's right to get conscripted into an unwinnable war and thrown into like a line of mortar fire after getting a week of training. And what are you going to do with AI? How's that going to help? No worry, we use AI now to show happy soldiers going to the front line who have like 12 fingers on each hand. Oh, I mean in the workforce. Okay, yeah. What an absolute disaster. An absolute disaster that was. And the people that have for the last 2 years have been saying like, this needs to stop. This needs to stop, please. Stop sending weapons to this country. Negotiate. Stop the war from happening. Stop the conflict. And what was the response to people that had that to say? You're a tanky. You just want Ukraine to be turned into a Russian outpost. And where is that gone now? Like, where has that gotten anybody? Ukraine is just fucked for the next generation. All its resources, all its public goods, all sold off to the highest bidder. About to be pillaged now by Western capital, even more so. Everything now privatized. Any left-wing parties banned. Filled with extremists, many of them actual Nazis, armed to the teeth with fighting experience, who are incredibly bitter about being used and betrayed by the West. Where do we think that's going to go? There was a tweet from a lib who was saying Obama and Biden were our two favorite presidents, responding to a hypo about Obama running in 24. That's just sad. She'd vote for Obama a third time if she could. If Zelensky isn't even picking a nice spot to reside in the U.S., they really got nothing out of this. I think he's going to be going down with the ship. I think he's going to get cut loose, honestly. I think he's going to get cut loose, or he's going to get assassinated by one of his own guys. Look what's going on with the fucking guy dropping the grenades into that public meeting the other day. He's surrounded by extremely angry Nazis. And it was amazing because his like identity was used to whitewash that this whole time. How could there be Nazis? This man's Jewish. Well, you're going to see how they turn on him like pretty soon when the extent to which they've gotten fucked is clear to everybody. Just sad. None of it need to happen. What an absolutely absurd situation. It's all because the Western Imperial Empire is in a death spiral. Yeah, I mean, like you could understand almost the sacrifice of Ukraine if it had led to them actually accomplishing their real objectives, which was destabilizing Russia, destroying Russia's economy, creating conditions that led to Putin either getting couped or removed from power, and none of those things have happened. So they just sacrificed Ukraine just for nothing, really. Maybe they just tied Russia up. Maybe they can spin it as some kind of a win because they tied Russia up for 2 years and like made them spend a lot of money and lose a lot of people and use a lot of resources. But their economy is doing better than ever. Putin is just as entrenched as ever. And now they have the entire eastern region of Ukraine, which they're never going to let go of. In living memory, both Ukraine and Russia thrived like never before in their history as partners in the Soviet Union. I mean, that's one of the ultimate fucking tragedies. Is they can, and there's this long history, this long legacy. As much as these people have tried to pretend that never existed, and really it was this like Russian occupation. Absolute bullshit. There's been this long, glorious legacy of friendship and cooperation between Russia and Ukraine. That entire history has been erased. You know, it led to the most prosperous moment for both of those places, and that entire legacy has been completely erased. Taking down all these Soviet statues of Ukrainian heroes that fought for the Red Army in World War II. Absolutely pissing on the legacy of the millions of Ukrainians that fought in the Red Army. No, and it hasn't been erased in Donbass. And kind of what I think is going to happen is you're going to see two different kinds of recovery. You're going to see one kind of rebuilding or recovery in... Holy shit, you hear that, don't you? I can see it on my mic. Listen to this. Do you hear that? I don't know what's going on. Like once a day, it's my upstairs neighbor. Like once a day, I start hearing this like really loud, rhythmic like slamming. And I know what that sounds like when I describe it like that, but it's like it can't be that, right? It like shakes the entire building. I can feel my whole place like shaking. But I don't think it's that. Because it really sounds like something being slammed on the ground. I don't think it's a treadmill though, because it's not like running. It's not. It could be. It must be like a working out thing. It's not running. It's not like bump, 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 bump. It's like, gah, 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 like they're hammering a sledgehammer into the ground. I don't know. Anyway. Sorry to get sidetracked there. I didn't realize my mic was actually picking it up. I don't even remember what I was saying now. I was in the middle of making an important point. Ukraine will have such an insane amount of debt that with a destroyed industrial base, their economic is dependent on aid from other countries indefinitely. Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I was saying, is that there's going to be two different recoveries. There's going to be the Western Ukraine recovery and rebuilding, and the Donbass version, which is probably going to be aided by China. And I think people in like Western Ukraine have been like, well, whether they're their own independent state, but they're clearly some kind of part of Russia, whether it's like just Russia or whether it's like a kind of independent zone, autonomous zone that's connected to Russia. Because I think in Western Ukraine they don't want the Chinese involved, because they're allies with Russia. So you're going to see the Western recovery, yeah, aka shock therapy 2, and then you're going to see a recovery in the eastern regions, in the Donbass, which probably China will be involved in. And we're going to see these two very different forms of recovery. And you're probably going to see this construction of like infrastructure, similar to what happened in Crimea, right? Even after the Crimea left Ukraine, these big infrastructure projects were built. But now it's like that's going to be even more, I imagine. If Russia is smart, they'll move either to Kiev or just short of it. They can't hold on to the whole country without focusing the insurgency on themselves only. But I don't think that that's ever been like in the cards. I think maybe in the first couple of weeks, they made people think that they were going to try and hold the whole country, but I don't think that was ever like anything that they intended to do. Yeah, the BRI hitting the Black Sea, that'd be huge. I don't know, it's going to be really interesting to see this, if this is how it works out. I don't even know if there's even a desire in Russia to have a peace process at this point, considering they were rebuffed so many times when they tried to have peace processes. But if that is how it works out, it turns into like West Ukraine and or just Ukraine, and then whatever's with these eastern regions carved off. It's going to be really interesting to see the way the two different kinds of development work out. It seems like the initial advance towards Kiev was to hit bases and weapons depots and shit. Yeah, and to like divert resources into stopping them there. I don't know, I'm not like a big military strategist or anything like that, and I never really tried to pretend to be, but... But Ukraine's going to be such a disaster, and that's just what I wish people would admit, you know? Ukraine is going to be completely fucked, and you know who fucked Ukraine? It wasn't Russia. It was us. It was the West. We did. NATO. Canada and the US. And the NATO countries. We completely fucked Ukraine. As many geopolitical analysis,
you're gonna have good
like
old Rob
Mearsheimer, were warning like years ago.
This.
Diverting my resources to retain my membership to the Friendship Triangle.
Thank you, Cutman. Thank you, Cutman, for 28 months, Tier 1. Very much appreciated. Thank you. What will happen to all the NATO accounts after the war is over? I think most of them have already closed down. There's maybe a few like true believers that this formed some kind of like integral part of their identity, which is like just sad in and of itself. fuck. It was so obvious what was are going on in the media in Ukraine when they suddenly switched to spelling it Kyiv instead of Kiev, which had always been the way news outlets spelled. We're helping. We're helping. It's called Kyiv now. No, I didn't adjust the noise gate. It goes for like 30 seconds on and off. 30 seconds of loud slamming off. Couple minutes, and then you're going to hear it and it comes back. I forgot about Kyiv. Exactly. No, it's been amazing actually to see a lot of those like OSINT Ukraine accounts being like, well, I guess our work here is done.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Kijiji. Thank you for the gifted sub, Kijiji Genie. Thank you for that. I really do, genuinely, without trying to like insult anyone or beef with anyone, I really wish that some of the people that built whole like identities and brands about like helping Ukraine and like promoting NATO and promoting arming Ukraine and promoting this whole narrative, I really would like them to like really pay close attention what is going to be happening to Ukraine over the next few years and really try to think hard and internalize that they supported that and that they contributed to it and that they took their precious time that they have to promote this. And you fucked Ukraine. You fucked the very people that you were trying to help. You fucked the very people that you were claiming to care about. You know, I wish people would think about this. This time we happen to be on the right side. I know NATO the West often gets it wrong. We made a lot of mistakes. We've done a lot of bad stuff. This time though, it's a purely good versus evil. There was literally people saying this kind of stuff, right? Like, I know it's not usually like this. I get it. And I was against Iraq and I was against Afghanistan and I was against Vietnam and I was against this and I was against that. This time though, it's just this noble struggle. It's like a black and white, good versus evil, easy to understand. I know. I'm surprised by it too, but that's the way it is, and that's we gotta. It's like no. You got played. And then you use your platform and your words, and you put your whole identity into helping the most powerful, evil people in the world completely fuck another country that you have nothing to do with. I oppose war retrospectively and support the current war. Yeah, and I support all big social... This is the liberal motto, right? I support all the previous social movements and racial justice movements as well, except the ones that's happening right now. Sure, we hired Nazis to lead NATO in the past, but they don't call themselves Nazis anymore. It's not the same. Or, yeah, sure, there's a couple of Nazis, but it's only like a few of them. Most people are not Nazis, and it's just a few Nazis. And listen, we gotta be with like the Nazis are doing the right thing right now, trying to defend their homeland. So we gotta support them this time. And now you've created this chaotic situation where millions of people's lives have gotten completely fucked over, to say nothing of the people that died in the war. And all these Nazis that you supported giving weapons to are now running around armed to the fucking teeth with battlefield training, with this axe to grind against the government and the people that put them in that position. You'll notice as well how, despite the fact that this was a totally mainstream argument, talking about these Ukrainian Nazis, yeah, they're bad guys, yeah, they do bad stuff, but they're on our team, so we got to support them. Weird how that doesn't apply to Hamas, you know? Isn't that weird how that works? You're not allowed to say that, and I'm not saying that, and I know no one in the chat is saying that, but if someone was to go on here or any other platform and say like, yeah, I know Hamas is bad, I know they do kind of all kinds of bad stuff, I don't agree with a lot of the things that they believe, but we got to give them lots of weapons because they're fighting on our side right now. So we got to help them, you know, and we got to support them no matter what. You know, I'm not saying that, and Jay is joking about saying that, and I know people in the community aren't saying that, but like, one of these positions is like, you'll lose your job and you'll lose your career and you'll get deplatformed or demonetized or whatever. And one of those positions is like, no, that's totally okay. That's totally reasonable. How do we need to arm the occupied people to remove the occupier in Ukraine, but not Palestine? Yeah, and why are we arming Israel and we're arming Ukraine? Despite these totally ostensibly like opposing viewpoints. Oh yeah, they're fighting for our freedom too. That's right. It somehow keeps Canada safe. It keeps Canada safe when we have when we create this endless meat grinder on the border regions of eastern Ukraine, where like young people and middle-aged people are being conscripted to just die pointlessly in eastern Ukraine. For some reason, that really keeps us safe here in Canada. Just silly. Got some cold coffee there as well. I don't know. Like, I guess it's a sensitive thing for me because like so many people have accused me over the last 2 years of being like pro Russia, or that I want Ukrainians to die, or that I think it's good, which has never been the case. Like, I genuinely do think it's a fucking tragedy what has happened. I just blame my own country. I blame Canada and the United States and NATO and the EU for wrecking Ukraine. I think it's an absolute tragedy what has happened. Israel, this is an interesting point too, Johnny, because you say Israel is our litmus test for all the other surrounding countries because at the end of the day, Israel's are white Westerners. And I want to just... Okay, hold on. We can't trust the rest of those Arab majority countries, which is why our foreign policy supports Ukraine. At the end of the day, they're willing to kill other Slavs to be inducted into the whites-only club, and we can't have the Levant or Russia competing with their hegemony over the natural resources of those regions. But the thing that's about Ukraine, though, and the thing that I think is going to piss a lot of people off that are like heavily armed and trained now, is that they had this like membership in the whites-only club dangled above their heads, and now it's being kind of yanked away. Like, I don't think they're ultimately, that's not what it's come down to. They won't be the official white people. They're going to go back to being Slavs now. Oh, sorry, you don't get into the EU, actually. Oh, sorry, you don't get into NATO, finally. Sorry about that. Sorry about those whole 2 years of war we created in your country, or over 10 years. We dangled it over their heads. Membership into the good white people club. White Westerners. We dangled it over their heads, and now we're yanking it away. And the people that we're doing that to are fascists who literally, you know, glorify and like these like fascist historical figures from their past, and they're now heavily armed, highly trained, and angry about being completely obviously used in the way they have. Yeah, whenever it's convenient, the West gets to decide who's white. Exactly. Look at a place like Greece as well. Like, Greece has been on the edge. It's hovered on the edge. Like, if Greece at the end of World War II had gone more to the Soviet camp, it wouldn't count as being a white country either. A lot of, like, many such examples. Look at Turkey. I have this convo in person. Yeah. Yeah, Greece, get your fiscal spending under control. We're pulling your white card. Like, literally. Literally. Do austerity, or you're not white anymore. We're taking away the white card unless you do austerity. You say you want to reject austerity. You say you want to have more public services. You don't want to privatize your economy. No longer white.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Yippee.
Thank you, Greasy Groob 69. Thanks for the 7 months of Prime. If Italy had managed to get the socialists in power, they'd probably still be struggling to get a fucking mortgage for their townhouses in the suburbs. For sure. Absolutely. Let's, I would like to get back to watching The Lobby. We watched the US version, and I would like to watch the UK version of The Lobby today. What do we think about that? Something this weekend did happen that really was not only extremely upsetting, but also was frustrating for me personally, because you see how an example of how atrocity denial works when it comes to Israel. There was that incident where Israeli bulldozers, there's been a number of hospital attacks, and these Israeli bulldozers crushed patients at the Kamal Adwan hospital. And one of the videos that was floating around about this, one of the videos that was purported to be of this incident that was floating around turned out to be from in Egypt from a few years ago, and got community noted. And then, so I have a tweet about this incident, and then the video gets community noted, and then I have a bunch of people being like, "Oh, you're sharing misinformation to me." So I deleted the tweet and re-uploaded a different version of the tweet showing the aftermath of the incident. And then people are able to convince themselves that this didn't happen. Which is the frustrating thing of how this misinformation does work. It gets used to then that was used to discredit the idea that this stuff is happening. Like then people are pretending that it's somehow misinformation to talk about Israeli bulldozers killing people, which happens like every single day. And there is eyewitness evidence of this incident and the aftermath of it, of this specific incident at Kamal Adwan Hospital. But then I have people being like, Rob, sharing misinformation. You were wrong. No, the community note was a little bit about that, but it was also that it was about Egypt, which is another thing that people are saying, like, it's so people don't care about these atrocities when just because it's in Egypt. And it's like, no, yeah, I'm still against U.S. client states murdering people with bulldozers, no matter where that is. The difference is, like, this is the specific incident that we're paying attention to right now at this moment, the ongoing onslaught of Gaza in which over 20,000 people have been killed. That's why we're focusing on that, because that's what's happening right now. It doesn't mean we don't care when bad things happen elsewhere in the past. You know? And there's horrible, like you said, people said, like, you never talk about Yemen. You don't care about Yemen. And it's like, well, we do. We do care about that, and we've talked about that a lot. You know, there's horrible things happening in Sudan and other places as well. And not only do we have to care about those things, but like the reality is with Israel, this is a highly publicized situation that it's our greatest ally perpetrating the crimes using our weapons and the diplomatic cover we're giving them. So we give that outsized attention because it's more obvious the way that like our own tax dollars and our own lifestyle is paying for this and subsidizing it. That's why we're focusing on it. Anyway, that was frustrating that I had people saying like, oh, you deleted that tweet, you're sharing misinformation or whatever. And then there's still evidence of the crime that I'm talking about happening. But people are more concerned with like trying to score Twitter points off of some guy you don't like because they don't want to just admit that like these kind of crimes, they support them and that they think that they're good. It's easier to pretend that it's not going on or it's all misinformation or disinformation. Besdy Marks has a really nice video about Zionism's history. It explains how it's mostly a Christian phenomena. We can take a look at that. I would like to do the lobby, but we could take a look at that as well. Let me just see. I have other videos that I was maybe planning to take a look at also. Apparently Jerry Seinfeld's going to Israel. Oh, good. Just what the IDF needs. What's the deal with Hamas? I told this woman I was seeing to condemn Hamas, and she's condemning hummus. Why will you condemn the hummus, but you won't condemn the Hamas? Something like that. I don't know. Not going to be scolded about morality by a man who used to date a high schooler in his 40s. Yeah. What's the deal with Hamas? They don't eat ham. They just got them hamless. He's visiting hostages, presumably in hopes he can pull off a verbal Hannibal doctrine. Well, maybe while he's there, he should tell Israel to stop shooting the hostages. Maybe you should tell them that. That to me would probably be the best way to help people that are taken hostage, is to stop shooting them and dropping bombs on them. Or just release them, you know? They have thousands of Palestinians in prison right now, including children. Why don't they just release them and then they can just get the hostages back right now, today? They can get all the hostages back today, just as they could have gotten every single hostage back on October 8th. This has been on offer now for months. But they would rather do genocide than get those hostages back. And when they shot those hostages, it was an open admission to everyone that they view Palestinian civilians as being fair game. Oh, they put them in hijabs. Okay, so when you see a Palestinian woman in a hijab, unarmed, waving a white flag, you shoot them, right? We just thought they were innocent Palestinian civilians. That's why we just murdered them like that. Oh, and I'm sure they killed a bunch in bombings already. For sure. Thanks, Dr. Maggot. I got it. I'm just wondering whether to put this on now or after. It's like how Hamas lures them into ambushes by playing recordings of children. Why does it even work on you? That's cartoonishly evil. Oh, they're going to rescue them now. It's because they want to rescue them so badly. Yeah, right. They're like, hey, it's a fight we can win. There's some kids in this alleyway. Finally, a fight we can win. We can feel like big men by beating these kids up or arresting them or just shooting them. They shot hostages who were wearing hijab. I think in this case, the hostages were like wearing civilian clothes and waving a white flag and possibly stripped down even more. But I think that was one of the explanations that was used by one of these like Zionist defenders. Is it Bethany Mandel? Is that her name? The person who's like, we should befriend neo-Nazis. She has this piece being like, we need to befriend neo-Nazis. And then she's lecturing everyone about anti-Semitism, of course. But she was saying this is why they shot them by accident, because they often put the women in hijabs when they're moving them around. Just basically openly saying, oh, it's totally acceptable and fair game to just target an unarmed woman wearing a hijab. Yeah, no, and they also adjusted the number down again of civilians that were killed, which is now, I believe, in like the 600s civilians that were killed, and no real clarification on how many of those people were killed by the IDF, and probably there never will be. But straight up 20% of Israeli troop deaths have been from friendly fire. Like, what the fuck are these guys doing? They get so many billions of dollars of weapons and training. Like, what are these guys doing? They're just wandering around, just like shooting at the first person they see. Israeli military veteran says he witnessed IDF Apache helicopter fire missile into Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. I mean, how many more stories need to come out about this? Okay, that's another question. Have we seen one of these stories in mainstream media in the West? One. Has it on CNN or CBC or MSNBC or Fox News, has one of these mainstream media institutions run one story about tank crews or Apache helicopters firing on their own citizens? Of which there's now like multiple testimonies in Israeli media. Literally on CBC this morning, they were still playing a clip of the IDF talking about beheaded babies. Man. OSINT did analysis, and that looked like a Palestinian Islamic Jihad helicopter. Oh, okay, I see. So there's some dispute. There's some dispute about this. What's that, Naismith? Important letter from UK Conservatives. We're witnessing a catastrophe. So the Conservatives in the UK are now to the left of Keir Starmer and the Labour Party on this, by the way. So that's great. We're witnessing a catastrophe precisely the kind the 1949 Geneva Conventions was supposed to prevent. As such, it's unconscionable that we should make Gaza an exception to the rule and obligations those accords created. By Conservative MPs to new Foreign Secretary David Cameron. So a better response now from the UK Conservatives than there is from the Labour Party. You got Keir Starmer tailing Rishi Sunak. Good thing they got rid of Corbyn, though, because of his anti-Semitism. In that CBC story, they said Hamas and the IDF need to agree to let more humanitarian aid in, as if Hamas is preventing that. Then they played the clip. Like we've talked about a number of times, Ninja Can, they've offered for now this entire time, we will release the hostages if you release Palestinian hostages. That was my understanding, that was the whole point of this whole Al-Aqsa flood operation in the first place, was to take a bunch of hostages so they could get their hostages back. Of which Israel has thousands, including children, who have not been locked up since October 7th, but have been locked up for years in many cases. This could have happened right away. Oh, they just need to agree. Literally, there's one side that's making an offer. We will release the hostages if you release our hostages. And Israel said, no, we want to do genocide instead. Europe is in a tizzy because Yemen's blockade got two major European shipping companies to completely pull out of the Red Sea. Yemen is just absolutely incredible, honestly, what Yemen is doing. Despite the genocide that Yemen has been victimized by. The Western-backed genocidal campaign that Yemen has been trying to live through over the last decade. And Yemen is coming through right now in a way that none of these other comprador Arab client states have. Even though they might say certain things like in Jordan or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or whatever. You have the Houthis and Yemen are the ones that are actually materially trying to help the Palestinians. CBC's got to be the worst of them all. I know I'm biased, but goddamn, they're even more dishonest than Israeli media. They're not just complicit, they're actively propagating the genocide. But they're very careful to do it under this kind of liberal, progressive viewpoint, though, right? I was still we watched one of those CBC clips a few weeks ago going, what would a more proportional Israeli response look like? Here's the red zone. Remember that? Here's where they are right now in the red zone. What would a green response look like? Now, we all know that no one thinks that Israel should just do nothing at all. And it's like, who knows that? Whoa. What are you talking about? Who knows that? No one is saying Israel should do nothing at all. Many people are saying that. Many people are saying they should do nothing at all. And they should, in fact, end the occupation, which is the result of the violence in the first place. Many people are saying that. But on Israel, that's how on CBC, fucking Freudian slip there. On CBC, that's how they presented these two sides. You've got the red zone where Israel is now. But what would a more proportionate response look like? Now, no one's saying that Israel should do nothing and just completely disregard that entire viewpoint. There's thousands of people marching through Canadian cities right now saying that exact thing. Let's turn to the experts like Andrew Coyne. That's right. Andrew Coyne, the true victim in all this. The true victim. The Hans Moleman voice. I was saying Israel shouldn't respond. Yeah, no, absolutely. insanity. Like, this is what makes up our mainstream media in this country. The CBC is just absolute dog shit. And all these conservative guys want to defund it because they think it's communist. That's the really amazing thing. These guys have the reactionary conservative paradise that they've always wanted, and they can't even see it. It's really kind of tragic. But you know, if you don't like mainstream media in Canada or wherever you are, and you like to tune into programs like this, if you can, folks, please subscribe to TRRS. As you know, the only way that I'm able to do this show each and every day, the show that you enjoy, that you like to tune into, and you like to chat and listen and be a viewer and what have you, the only way that I'm able to continue to do this show, folks, is if people subscribe. I must make the little number at the bottom of the screen go up every single day, as you know. It's my blessing and my curse to have to do this. Thank you, Red Scary. It's my blessing and my curse. So if you can, please subscribe. It's $5 a month. It's free if you have an Amazon Prime account. You can gift subscriptions to rocket right all the way up to the very tippy top of the elite tier of the friendship triangle system. That's Twitch's only two-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. And it really helps me out a lot. And it's the only way that I'm able to do this program is through the endless generosity of the TRRS community members. If you can, please subscribe to this program.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Fart.
Nice. Thank you, Bleep Lord. Thank you, Bleep Lord, for that. You're one of my favorite Canadians, but Leaping Larry beats you because he's my beard husband. Well, I guess that's all right. I guess I'll accept that. So do I have any more takers? Do I have any more takers before I move on to the next segment? We're going to watch some video content and learn together. Does anyone else want to subscribe to TRRS? Don't all subscribe at once. Don't all subscribe at once. All the subscriptions can get caught in the pipes and they get all clogged up.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through.
You don't want
all
the
this.
subscriptions to get clogged
Hi,
up.
Rob.
Fuck about that.
You
I
can
think
count on
about
me. You're
that
gonna have
is
good
really
old
just the
Rob
most.
to talk you through all this.
It's the most Canadian way of manufacturing
You can count
consent
on
for
me. You're gonna
genocide.
have good old Rob to talk you through all this. You can count on me. You're gonna have good
About
old
that.
Rob to talk you through all
About
this.
that genocide.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Anon, I love you, Anon. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs. But now, of course, it just plays the alert many times.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Not that I'm complaining. Okay? Not that I'm complaining.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Your upstairs neighbor is simply trying to unclog
You
the
can
subs
count
that
on
got
me.
stuck
You're
in
gonna
the
have
pipe.
good old
Thank
Rob to talk you through all this.
Hands over subscription sacrifice TRRS Rob knife.
you. Boy, I feel pretty silly now,
You can
don't
count
I?
on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this. You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
It's so absurd. About that.
You can count on me. You're gonna have
Seawater
good old
tunnels?
Rob to
Explaining
talk you through all
Israel's
this.
plan to flush out Hamas. About that. It's so ridiculous. Gilf of Tonkin, thanks so much for the 21 months tier 1. Thank you, Anon, again for the 5 gifted subs. That's very kind of you. Thanks, Highway 70, for 11 months of Prime. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Takiero, for 16 months tier 1. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Jeremiah, for 25 months tier 1. Appreciate you, Jeremiah. Thank you. Thank you also to Not Another Beanstain for 5 months of Prime. Beanstain, thank you.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Diego, for a gifted sub as well. Diego, aka Comrade Social Distancing, thank you for that. And thank you, Bup Forte, as well, for 100 bits. Thank you for that. Yeah, how many hostages drowned in the seawater? Like, I wonder if that's going to be addressed. About that, Israel's plan to pump seawater into the tunnels where they claim, and as we know, Israeli or hostages have been kept. About that. Just absurd. The NGO voice. It's so bad.
Is serious about flooding Hamas tunnels in Gaza with seawater. This image, taken November 30th by an American satellite imaging company, shows a beach near Gaza City. Note the black pipe running from the Mediterranean. That wasn't there in an identical shot about 2 months earlier on October 8th, the start of the war. Now take a look at this photo posted by the Israeli army. CBC hasn't verified this, but it shows IDF troops on the beaches of Gaza. Again, note what looks like black pipe here, here, and here. This video, published by the Daily Mail, citing Israeli media, appears to show the operation close up. CBC hasn't verified this video, but it shows IDF soldiers underground operating pumps attached to long hoses. The Wall Street Journal cites unnamed U.S. officials who say flooding has already begun. And the IDF's chief of staff said as recently as last week that flooding Hamas tunnels was a good idea. But it's been hard to get any concrete details beyond that.
About that. I swear we would be getting the same thing if Nazi Germany was happening right now. It was the early stages of that. About that. About these claims that Jewish people are being persecuted in Nazi Germany. Notice these images we've been provided by the Nazi government showing that at these camps where they've been voluntarily bringing Jewish population, they have swimming pools and other facilities. About that. This is why we need to turn away ships of refugees. About that. About the Canadian government's refusal to allow in Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany. Some representatives of governments tell us they're alarmed that these refugees will import dangerous Marxist ideology into our society. About that. The Judeo-Bolshevik threat. Exactly. Like, you know, this would be the tone. This would be the tone. In like 1930s CBC. Until the switch flipped and we had to unfortunately for our ruling class actually join the good side of that one. Much to the chagrin of our Nazi sympathizing ruling class. That's how they would be presenting all this stuff, though. And the 1930s would have a transatlantic accent. About that, see? You know, look, that seriously would be the exact, if CBC existed in the 30s, that's what it would sound like. We're heading towards the, like, it's, you know, the 30s are going to be so insane, folks, unless some kind of miracle happens. I feel like we're headed for some crazy shit in the 1930s, if the 2030s rather. I said 19 because we're coming up on this like centennial kind of reliving of the exact same circumstances. You see Germany's starting to think about reinstituting mandatory military service and stuff. It's like, oh, good. Great. No, I love this. It's like it rhymes. It's a history. It's looking very bad, and you add in all the climate catastrophe on top of everything, and the massive million-person refugee caravans in both Western Europe and Southern United States, and the normalization and the dehumanization that's taken place against these immigrants, while promoting colonial outposts like Israel, and totally like normalizing the idea of just mass slaughter of these swarthy hordes. That's a lot of what's happening right now. It's like it's just this idea of open mass dehumanization and slaughter of these non-Western invading hordes of swarthy rapist natives. That's a lot of what's happening right now, getting us used to this idea that it's okay to imprison them and then eventually just start mowing them down with machine guns or drones or putting them in concentration camps. We're totally gonna have a Gaza on the southern United States border eventually, or in the UK as well, Bexhill in Children of Men. There's gonna be a bunch of Gazas, open air prison camps where all the undesirables get sent. Oh, for sure, you kind of did with Arpaio, but it's like it's not like the extent, the extent to which we're going to see that kind of stuff. These are just like small little like trial balloons. Once it becomes industrialized and monetized as well, you got all these private security firms and security companies and making drones and other technology. It's really bad. It's really bad. We're headed toward, and this is exactly why we need to stand on the right. It doesn't mean that's where we're going. I don't try not to be like doomer about this stuff. Sometimes it certainly feels like that, but like this is exactly why it's important right now to be on the right side of things and to recognize that that's where things are going. So we don't have any illusions once the propaganda starts really getting turned on. And maybe, just maybe, we can tear the thing down before it gets built up. Let's take a look at this video from Bez D. Marks.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Oh shit, Sam Sater, what a fucking nightmare. Sam Sater can't find me here. I'm hidden. I'm hidden. Okay, I'm back. Thanks for the raid, Majority Report. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate it. We were just about to watch this video. Came right at a good time. We're learning about the kind of origins of Zionism and the origins of Israel right now, watching this video called What is Zionism by Bez D. Marks, which should be, I think, really good. Just started it. So we're going to take a look at that. But while you're here, please smash the follow button if you can. Please smash the follow button. I'm Rob. It's nice to see you. It's nice to see you. It's nice to have you in watching the stream. Please smash the follow button. That really helps me out if you can. And if you really want to, you can support the stream as well with a subscription or a sub gift or any other. There's many other forms of doing that. Don't want to pressure anyone too much. I know you just got here. I don't want to start telling you what to do. If you can subscribe, though, that would be wonderful. If anyone has a spare Prime sub that you might have. But we're just about to watch this video. What is Zionism? I think it's going to be really informative. It's, as always, understanding the history of something is going to help inform or give you an actually informed analysis of that thing when it's happening. That's what dialectical and historical materialism is all about. Is having that materialist understanding of the historical forces at play, and without which you can't form a correct analysis of this or any other kind of geopolitical kind of situation. Not only having an understanding of the way that the history works, but also about capital and power and who has it and who doesn't. And where are the forces of imperialism? Where are the forces of colonialism? We need to understand the history in order to be able to answer these questions. So thanks again for the raid. I'm going to get started on this. No takers on the subscription, but that's totally okay. That's totally fine. We're going to get there. We're going to get there eventually. Let's watch this. I'll start it over. It was just 20 seconds into the video. Thanks again to Majority Report for the raid.
As Gaza is being ethnically cleansed by Israel, tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed and about 2 million have been displaced. These are unprecedented numbers, but one cannot fully comprehend these events without understanding the underlying philosophy and political intent of this genocide. And more importantly, in order to know how to most effectively fight against it and the imperialist powers supporting and relying on it, no matter where you live, it is key to know about the concrete history and essence of the ideology at the core of this dreadful catastrophe. In the 1880s, European seekers of wealth and expansion reached a high point of colonial annexation during the so-called scramble for Africa. In order to generate bigger profits than in the saturated home markets, bank and industrial capital began to merge and export investment into the global south to compete against their fellow imperialists for foreign markets and resources. It was during these frenzied times of conquest when the beginning of Zionist colonization of Palestine was inspired. The guy on this famous illustration of that period's colonialism is called Cecil Rhodes, one of the most powerful capitalists and colonialists of the 19th century, founder of the De Beers diamond mining monopoly, which profited off the apartheid system in South Africa. The ambitious British industrialist and politician thought the British were the first race of the world and envisioned a united American-British empire. Through the British South Africa Company, he would colonize the territories in southern Africa for the British. One of these, later called Rhodesia, a land governed by white settler Europeans,
you can count on
would
me.
be
You're
named
gonna have
after
good
him,
old Rob
until
to
it was
talk you through all this.
Thank you, Dr. Maggot, for the gifted sub.
abolished and renamed to Zimbabwe in 1980. When the founder of political Zionism campaigned among the ruling classes in Europe, he wrote a letter to Rhodes telling him, quote, "You are being invited to help make history. It doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor, not Englishmen, but Jews. How then do I happen to turn to you, since this is an out-of-the-way matter for you? How indeed Because it is something colonial. You, Mr. Rhodes, are a visionary politician. I want you to put the stamp of your authority on the Zionist plan. It is a plan full of culture and quite good for England, for Greater Britain. Israel would later sell weapons to the White Rhodesian government during the Rhodesian-Bosch War. Settlers of the world, unite. He tried to convince the British Empire in particular, emphasizing their common colonial benefits, that a Jewish state in Palestine would, quote, form a part of a wall of defense for Europe in Asia, an outpost of civilization against barbarism. Now, back then, being a colonialist
We're still seeing that trope, the
considered
outpost of civilization against the barbarism. Like, that trope is still so deeply embedded into all the coverage that we see in our media about this, right? And look no further than the whole, like, coordinated Hamas rape gang story as a way to, like, they take that exact trope, that exact narrative, and using it to justify the ongoing violence and the ongoing genocide. The lone civilizational outpost defending the West from these swarthy hordes of rapists that want to come and take your land and take away your virginal white women. Like, this trope is just, it's ancient. It's been used over and over and over and over again.
something cool among Europeans. It was in vogue. All the famous Zionists were proud to be labeled as such. Nowadays, it's not so fashionable anymore. Zionists and their partners rebranded their colonial project as a progressive, gay and vegan-friendly endeavor, as something decolonial. Here's the German newspaper Tagesspiegel writing that Zionism is in truth not something colonial, but something decolonial. Another important new idea at the time was the doctrine of nationalism, which swept across Europe. Various versions of it gained hold among European intellectuals and the upper classes. One such version was ethno-nationalism, which stresses common ethnic ancestry. Countries like Russia, Poland, Hungary, and Germany would perceive themselves as distinct tribes, in conflict or under threat from other nation tribes. Their aim was to establish a racially pure space, reflecting
did me
the
dirty in that
so-called
one, Dakadude, by not telling me
authentic
about the
spirit of
mic
nation.
thing.
Zionism would mirror the form of
Brandon was too shy to be like, hey, your mic sounds like shit, can you fix that?
And the idea that Jewish people cannot possibly be part of those countries as a minority alien body. They could only thrive as a part of a country's majority. Charles Joseph of Ling, a field marshal of Austria-Hungary, stated in the 18th century, quote, "I believe that the Jew is not able to assimilate, and that he will constantly constitute a nation within a nation, wherever he may be. The simplest thing to do would, in my opinion, be returning to them, their homeland, from which they were driven." Some Jewish intellectuals, not at all orthodox in their religious beliefs, accepted the ethno-nationalist premise of the anti-Semites. Zeev Jabotinsky, the founder of revisionist Zionism, the current later giving rise to right-wing parties such as Netanyahu's Likud, stated that the creation of a Jewish majority was the fundamental aim of Zionism.
Old hangover from the nationalist era of international
Jewish
relations.
state means a Jewish majority, and Palestine will
this
become
MF said
a Jewish
leftist
country
studio.
at the moment when it has a Jewish majority. Most perversely, many Jewish nationalists began to theorize that there are alleged racial bonds among Jews which would constitute them as a nationality with the usual national rights, including a right to a territory of their own. Moses Hess, an early thinker of Jewish nationalism, wrote, quote, "Jews are first of all a race." We saw the rise of a perverted Jewish nationalist hope that maybe DNA could provide conclusive evidence of a migrating Jewish ethnos of common origin that eventually arrived in the land of Israel. To this day, we see instances of this, like the rabbis in Israel requiring DNA tests in order to determine if they're allowed to marry. As we know, Jewish people cannot marry people of another faith in Israel. Of course, the other group trying to determine Jews by their blood that comes to mind are the so-called scientific anti-Semites of the European fascists. It's also interesting that it's difficult to do an ancestry DNA test without court order, otherwise the myth that settlers are from the Levant instead of Europe or New York might break the myth that the settlers are indigenous to the region. Before the emergence of Jewish nationalism or Zionism in Europe during the early 20th century, Jews, much like other groups, did not identify themselves as a distinct nation in the modern sense, and most certainly not on a global scale. Zionism threatened the natural belonging of many Jews to the countries where they lived. Jewish minister in the British government, Edwin Montagu, complained, quote, "The country for which I have worked ever since I left
the Christian Crusades were not colonialism because Christians come from the Holy Land." That's right. This is the same logic. Amy Schumer is indigenous to the Levant. That's right.
University, England, the country for which my family have fought,
talk about this.
tells me that my national home is Palestine. Jewish people in the so-called Pale of Settlement in the western region of the Russian Empire were mostly forbidden to seek employment or permanent residency outside that region. Revolts against the Tsar reached their high point when Tsar Alexander II got assassinated by Narodnaya Volya in 1881. A counter-revolutionary onslaught followed, framing the bad economic conditions and the assassination as part of a Jewish conspiracy. Later, Narodnaya Volya tried to kill Tsar Alexander III, the older brother of Vladimir Lenin.
It's funny because to talk about the anti-Semitism of Tsarist Russia as well, considering the ways that Lenin and the Soviet Union is somehow framed as being like uniquely anti-Semitic, despite their role in like talking about the dangers of anti-Semitism, one, and also fighting the fascists and liberating concentration camps in World War II. You have Barry Weiss and others saying it's like a Soviet. That's what we're seeing right now in college campuses with these pro-Palestine protests. It's this Soviet-style anti-Semitism. It's fucking insane. Yeah, Tsarist Russia was really a safe haven for Jews prior to the Soviets taking control. Absolutely backwards.
Alexander Ulyanov was involved, but the plot
they never like talking about how much the Soviets did for Israel.
The traumatic experience of violent pogrom.
Yeah, and it's kind of a leftover from the fact that like a lot of resistance to Zionism in modern times is Marxist. They ignore the role that like Stalin himself played in helping to create Israel, which is one of the historic L's for the big man.
Resulted in widespread displacement and fleeing. But most Jews didn't emigrate to Palestine, but to the United States and Western Europe, where Jewish people could lead relatively better lives due to the French Revolution and so on. They had no desire whatsoever to move to a place that had a radically different climate and environment. Although repression of Jews in the 19th century added to Zionism's appeal, Zionism did not emerge simply because of it, as is often portrayed. As Professor for Jewish History Michael Stanislavski explains, the first expressions of this new ideology were published well before the spread of the new anti-Semitic ideology and before the pogroms of the early 1880s. The fundamental cause of the emergence of modern Jewish nationalism was the rise, on the part of Jews themselves, of new ideologies that applied the basic tenets of modern nationalism to the Jews, and not a response to persecution. Moreover, only a small minority of Jews in Eastern Europe adopted Zionism as a way to liberate themselves. There was another ideology emerging, far more popular among the oppressed Jewish people, which would propel them to emancipate themselves where they lived, and to contribute to a world historic revolution that would arrive soon, revolutionary socialism. In order to create the new nation, it was crucial to determine a national language, which was Hebrew, which hitherto had been more of a lingua franca, while different Jewish communities had their own language. But these components of the new nationalism were not enough. What had been missing was the creation of a new state. And it was in a certain city in Switzerland where the first structure of the future Israeli state was born, led by a certain man from Austria who would become known as the father of political Zionism. If you look at the official website of the Israeli Foreign Ministry regarding the history of Palestine, it would appear as if the magnificent economic flourishing was concentrated in the Jewish communities. Then, if you believe official state history, which is also taught in school, it appears as if Palestine became a desert land in the 19th century as the Ottoman rule declined in quality, suggesting that the local Arab population was incompetent in managing that desolate area which only came to thrive again under Zionist leadership. This narrative, which is also prevalent in the West, reminds of the empty land theory propagated by European settlers in 19th century South Africa to justify the white, supposedly civilized Afrikaners' claims to the land. In truth, however, research shows that Palestine, far from being a desert, was a thriving Arab society. Toward the latter half of the 19th century, about 500,000 Arab-speaking people lived in the land of Palestine, then under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. They spoke Arabic, most were Muslims, who lived in peaceful coexistence with Christians, who made up about 10%, and with 15,000 Jewish people, about 3% of the population. The vast majority of people still lived in rural areas. Palestine's economy was mainly agricultural. As the incorporation of Palestine into the world economy proceeded, it accelerated the dissolving of traditional customs. Though studies show the so-called modernization of Palestine's economy, the emergence of private property relations and generalized commodity exchange, which also weakened the power of the elite families and which led to the improvement of the status of women, began long before the arrival of the Europeans. They did not invent the progress. Palestine became a distinct economic center, subject neither to Cairo or Beirut.
This foreign country didn't build houses in the
longer
Western style. Clearly, it's empty. In the same way, their government is not a Western-style liberal democracy either. That means they're savages and a brainwashed totalitarian dystopia. It's the same kind of colonizer logic.
Biblical Palestine. After the Paris Congress ended the Crimean War in 1856, the Middle Eastern...
It's weird too, this empty land theory doesn't apply to letting in immigrants to Canada or the United States now also. You would think. Do you know how much empty space there is in this fucking country? We have so much room for every single person that would ever want to immigrate here. It's weird how we don't talk about this empty land theory. America is so paranoid about immigrants coming into their nation that you've got the progressive liberal establishment right now passing these like fascist immigration policies right now. Plenty of empty land, plenty of space, plenty of room for everybody. Like, what's the big deal? Like, there's this huge expanse in the left where there's like more cows than people. Fucking just bring everyone. They can all live there. It's funny how this kind of thing is selectively applied. It applies to when we come to these places, but once we're there, then we like, no, I think it's good now. I think now that we control the land and the immigration system, now no longer this applies anymore.
Markets of the Ottoman Empire were open to British or French capital, causing internal displacement or
but
loss
Forte,
of land.
and same with the indigenous
from real
communities as
estate
well.
and banking skyrocketed, and a strong comprador bourgeoisie
When you're talking
emerged
about
alongside a
gender
more
and
locally
sexuality and
oriented
stuff.
capitalist class. Naturally, the emergence of the doctrine of nationalism is closely related to the development of capitalist relations.
Yeah,
both
Conrad,
as
Jimmy,
a
don't give them any
byproduct of
ideas.
cultural
I'm sure we would do land
homogenization
distribution
through
if they were white American refugees. We probably would do that. Don't give anyone any ideas. Seems like a nice serious streaming guide here. It'd be a shame if someone was off topic. Thankfully, there's no one in this community that would engage in that kind of tomfoolery.
large-scale production and infrastructure, and as a means of the capitalist class to paint themselves as the representatives of the whole people. However, whereas nationalism takes on a chauvinist character among powerful, oppressing nations, the emergence of nationalist ideas in dominated nations is crucially determined by the oppression of the imperialist or colonialist power. Thus, the intelligentsia in Palestine would join others in the Arab world in formulating a national doctrine, which led them to struggle for more autonomy within and soon for independence from the Ottoman Empire. Palestine appeared on the maps around the world as a living country, with Palestinians speaking their own dialect, with their own customs and rituals. Along with nationalism, there came the idea of secularism. In the Arab world, Jewish, Christian, and
it's
Muslim
really important too,
people
because
saw
there's this whole
themselves as
Zionist
part of
myth
the
that there
same
was no
national
Palestine,
identity,
that there's
and
culture
arranged
didn't
themselves
exist,
on the
that it
basis
just
of a shared
is
territory,
some kind of
language,
creation or
culture,
myth.
and history. If it wasn't for the rise of Zionism, this would have remained the case for Palestine as well. So, contrary to the Israeli story, Palestine was not an empty and desolate land waiting to come into bloom. It was a rich and thriving Eastern Mediterranean place, undergoing the processes of modern capitalist development and nationalization, with all the benefits and tragedies that come with it. Palestine could have followed the path of Lebanon or Syria if it wasn't for its colonization by the Zionist movement, which interrupted this process and turned it into a disaster for the indigenous people of Palestine. Toward the latter half of the 19th century, there were a great number of American and European missionaries spreading the idea of modernization, such as the Swiss Calvinist Samuel Gobain. Over 3,000 books on Palestine were written by Europeans during that period, painting Palestine as a primitive land to be redeemed by Europeans. Many Christians at the time supported the idea of the Jews returning to the Holy Land as a nation one day, because it's part of the divine scheme for the end of time, going along with the second coming of the Messiah, this time not as a suffering servant, but as a conqueror King of Kings, with the armies of heaven on his side. The history of Christianity is closely intertwined with the history of anti-Semitism. Especially among the Protestants, there was a strong link between the notion of the end of the millennium and the conversion of the Jews and their return to Palestine. Thomas Brightman, a 16th century English clergyman, and many like him, wanted the Jews to either convert to Christianity or leave Europe. Shall they return to Jerusalem again? There is nothing more certain. The prophets do everywhere confirm it and beat about it. Second President of the United States, the Christian John Adams, stated, "I really wish the Jews again in Judea as an independent nation." Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, had been influenced by a prominent Catholic writer and politician who thought the Jews were the legitimate masters of Judea. When the French invaded the Arab world in 1799, Napoleon issued a proclamation to offer Palestine as a homeland to Jews under the protection of France in order to establish French influence in the region. His vision did not succeed, but it didn't die. It would soon materialize under the British. Zionism, as you can see, was a Christian colonial project before it became a Jewish one. The leading proponent of Christian Zionism, Anthony Ashley Cooper,
one
or
of the
the
major
Lord of
drivers of the whole
Shaftesbury, played
Mideast
an
policy in the
essential
first
role
place
in
as
the
it pertains
British
to
ruling
Israel.
class eventually adopting Zionism. He wrote, quote, "The Jews must be encouraged to return in yet greater numbers and become once more the husbandmen of Judea and Galilee. Though admittedly a stiff-necked, dark-hearted people, and sunk in moral degradation, obduracy, and ignorance of the gospel, they are not only worthy of salvation, but also vital to Christianity's hope of salvation." The first British consulate opened in 1838 in Jerusalem, encouraging Jews to come to Palestine. Its most famous early consul was James Finn, who wrote openly for the first time about the possible displacement of Palestinians. Finn, who absolutely hated Islam, organized the purchase of lands and real estates for missionaries and businesses.
You didn't mean to say this whole thing is part of the Christian doomsday cult that we all live in? Oh, fuck.
The German Temple movement, which also had its influence on the early settler colonialism in North America, became especially interested in rebuilding a Jewish temple in Jerusalem
Christian
to bring
doomsday
about
cult
redemption
yet again.
and absolution, convinced
Why does
of
this keep happening?
precipitating the second coming of the Messiah. Senior members of the Royal Prussian court enthusiastically supported their doctrine. The Templars founded several colonies in Palestine until they were kicked out in 1948 by the new Jewish state. From the 1880s, at roughly the same time as the missionaries, the first wave of Zionist settlement began after preparation in Eastern Europe. In Zionist speak, this wave is referred to as the first Aliyah. To this day, moving to the land of Israel is referred to as making Aliyah, which means ascent. Moving to Palestine is seen as an act that elevates Jews to a higher form of existence. Hence, emigrating from Israel is called Yerida, which means descent. Making Aliyah to this day is possible for any Jew around the world.
Yes, Timmy, we've been over it many times.
If you convert to Judaism, you can easily move into Israel, though if you grew up there but you're Palestinian,
what these Christian Zionists actually think about Jewish people.
Majority goal, of course. These early settlers looked upon themselves as haludzim, pioneers, comparing themselves to white settlers who pushed into the West in North America. One of the most famous Zionists of those supposed pioneers was Leon Pinsker, founder of Hovevit Zion, Lovers of Zion. In his writings, he argued that antisemitism is not a temporary phenomenon, but, quote, an inherited aberration of the human mind, and that destroying it, quote, can only be in vain. He thus concluded that the proper and only remedy would be the creation of a Jewish nationality, of a people living upon its own soil. The international Jewish question must receive a national solution. A large number of the estimated 25,000 first Aliyah settlers did not stay for very long, often suffering from hunger and disease. Israeli sociologist and crucial contributor to the study of settler colonialism, Gershon Shafir, explains in his seminal book from 1989 how first Aliyah settlers struggled with establishing pure colonies
I'm just gonna get some more
and sought
coffee,
the
folks.
help
One
of
sec.
the Rothschild banking family. Aided by French experts, Edmond de Rothschild modeled colonies around the French colonization in North Africa, mainly around vineyards, using local seasonal labor. The pure colony model aims at the removal of the indigenous population and create an economy based on white labor, establishing ethnic homogeneity. Whereas mixed colonies, or the plantation model of the Portuguese in colonial Brazil for instance, used slave labor from the native population, here the colonizing ethnicity merely controls the land but doesn't want to work on it. This state of affairs changed with the second Aliyah and the arrival of the pseudo-socialist Zionists, who were not happy with that, since they wanted to have Jewish labor and not the cheap Arab labor which many Jewish employers tended to favor. Settler colonialism is a form of colonialism where foreign settlers arrive in a country with the intent of taking it over, so their arrival is actually an invasion. It differs from classical colonialism in several respects. Firstly, settlers rely only initially on the bigger empire for their survival. Sometimes, as in South Africa or Palestine, the settlers do not belong to the same nation as their imperial partners. Then, they usually form a separate entity by ceding from the mother country, often through a struggle. Second, while classical colonialism is usually predominantly interested in extracting resources from their possessions, settler colonialism strives to take over the land in a foreign country by eliminating the people already living there. Patrick Wolfe, a leading scholar of settler colonialism, calls this the logic of elimination.
Thank you, Bison.
The logical consequence of
I'm just
settler
putting on socks as
colonialism
well. That's what
is
I'm
to
doing down here.
accomplish their goals by either genocide, ethnic cleansing, a form of apartheid, or all of the three together. This is important to understand. While Zionism is one particular form of settler colonialism, it is comparable to all other settler colonial projects in history. But gradual infiltration proved to be a failure in colonizing Palestinian land. What was needed was an institution aiming at the creation of a state. Soon, those Zionists in Europe who thought the first Aliyah settlements were too slow would meet and shape the history of Palestine forever. In late August of 1897, in the city of Basel, northwest of Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress was convened and chaired by the aforementioned founding father of political Zionism, Theodor Herzl, the second most important Zionist in history so far. Herzl initially planned to have the Congress in Munich in Germany, but the Jewish community leadership there, Orthodox
If you
and
will it,
Reform,
dude, it is
didn't
no
like his
dream.
ideas at all. Reform Judaism is a major Jewish denomination that emphasizes the importance of ethical over ceremonial aspects. In various conferences, its adherents rejected the Zionist idea. At a conference in Frankfurt, rabbis decided to delete all prayers for a return to Zion from the ritual. The Pittsburgh Conference in 1885 stated, quote, "We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and we therefore expect neither a return to Palestine nor the restoration of any laws concerning the Jewish state." Famous leader Rabbi Kaufman Kohler rejected the idea that Judea is the home of the Jew, an idea which unhomes the Jew all over the wide earth. An American Reform rabbi compared Zionists
These
like Herzl to
anti-Semites.
charlatan alchemists claiming to be scientific. Austrian rabbi Adolf Jelinek, who just like Herzl was from Vienna, said that Zionism endangers the standing of European Jews, saying most of them reject it and declared, "We are at home in Europe." Liberal Jews at the time mostly rejected Zionism as well. And more
It's
importantly,
anti-Semitic to
there was
believe that Jews should
intense
actually just
opposition from
stay
Jewish
in the communities where they
socialists,
live.
but more on that in the next part.
It's anti-Semitic
In
to think
Basel,
that.
the delegates to the Congress adopted the
If you think that
Hatikva
Jewish
as
people
its
should just
anthem,
stay in your own
which was
community
already
rather
the
than
anthem
go
of
live
the
in
lovers
Israel,
of Zion,
you're an
and later
anti-Semite,
became the national
according to
anthem
some of these
of the
folks.
State of Israel. More importantly, they formulated the Basel program, which stated, quote, Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine, secured under public law. And with this, it cemented the political Zionist vision, which now came to replace
You
the
can
more
count on me.
gradual,
You're gonna have good
loosely
old
organized
Rob to
approach in
talk you through all
colonizing
this.
Palestine. Theodor
TRRS
Herzl wrote in
Sankara.
his diary a few days later, quote,
Chic TV, thanks for 6 months of Prime. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said this out loud today, I would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it. If he was alive today, he would surely think that he had the last laugh. Theodor Herzl was born in 1860 in Vienna. He was a journalist and tried being a good playwright until his death. He was highly ambitious and perceived by many as charismatic, sometimes called King of the Jews. In 1896, he wrote Der Judenstaat, probably the most important Zionist piece of writing.
Unhomes, the first quote from that British guy hit particularly hard. The country I've fought for and lived my entire life, Britain, tells me my homeland is Palestine. Exactly. And I think that's one of the fucked up things about this moment, too, is we've seen that logic become just widespread. And it's the people that are calling us anti-Semites that are making this case. No, your home's not in Quebec. No, your home's not in Ontario. No, your home's not in England. No, your home's not in France or Germany. Your home is here. That's where you're supposed to go. Go there. And they're the ones lecturing us about supporting Jewish people and anti-Semitism and this stuff. Leave the community that you've lived in for generations and go live in Israel. You're welcome. You know, it's really perverse. Glad to hear that, L. Spanner.
Now, in English, this pamphlet is translated as the Jewish state, which is technically an incorrect translation, and this is not just a minor pedantic quibble. Judenstaat would correctly be translated as the Jews' state, and it more closely reflects Herzl's ideology, namely, to have a state for Jews. He didn't bother too much with it being Jewish, about Judaic culture, and he couldn't even read Hebrew. According to him, the Jews didn't need their own culture or language. First and foremost, they needed a state. Herzl, much like most other important Zionists at the time, was not really religious, nor a national liberator as Zionists claim. He was just an old-fashioned colonizer liberal. He opposed the romantic, idealist interpretation of other nationalists and favored Friedrich Nietzsche's individualist will-to-power realism, and the view that, quote, conflict is essential to man's highest efforts. Thus, only state power can and should break all obstacles in front of it. What is key here in the development of what Zionism is in its actual political manifestations is that Herzl was persuasive in proposing not to merely rely on gradual infiltration and cultural considerations, like some other Zionist currents back then, well aware that indigenous resistance would not let that happen. Quote, gradual infiltration is bound to end badly, for there comes the inevitable moment when the government in question, under pressure of the native populace, which feels itself threatened, puts a stop to further influx of Jews. Immigration, therefore, is futile unless it is based on our guaranteed autonomy. Zionism was now synonymous with this ideological thrust. The Zionist visionary could foresee what colonization really entails, writing in his diary, quote, we must expropriate gently the private property on the state assigned to us. We shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment for it in the transit countries, while denying it employment in our country. The property owners will come over to our side. Both the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly. Herzl strongly opposed those who thought integration or assimilation of Jews in Europe can work, as anti-Semitism is a permanent problem. Quote, in the world as it is now, and will probably remain for an indefinite period, might takes precedence over right. He thought anti-Semitism cannot be solved due to Jewish dependence on a country's economy. In the introduction, he writes, quote, "Even if we were a nation of entrepreneurs, such as absurdly exaggerated accounts make us out to be, we should not require another nation to live on. We do not depend on the circulation of old commodities, because we produce new ones." The Zionist pseudo-socialists who would soon dominate the Zionist movement would come up with similar justifications. Herzl proposed turning anti-Semitism to the advantage of the Zionists' pursuit of power. Quote, "Yes, we are strong enough to form a state. The governments of all countries scourged by anti-Semitism will be keenly interested in obtaining sovereignty.
You see the
for us.
connection between anti-Semitism and Zionism.
Altneuland, Old New Land are the two most important works by Herzl.
Anti-Semites around the world help us. They help us with our whole project here.
The title of the second one in Hebrew is special.
The more things change.
Tel Aviv, reflecting the idea of a rebirth in the ancient Jewish land. When the city was founded in 1909 as a small settlement to the north of Jaffa, out of nowhere, there had been other suggestions, such as Herzliya, but it
In Ninja Can, this is kind of something I'm interested in as well. You say, isn't it straight up inaccurate how we even use the term anti-Semitism in place of anti-Jewish? If I understand it correctly, Semite specifically refers to language. So if you just learn to speak Hebrew, that makes you a Semite. It makes anti-Zionist anti-Semitic. Am I drawing the line correctly? I thought it was more of a eugenics thing. Like Semitic peoples. But I do think there needs to be a sort of delineation between these two things now, because this word has been completely weaponized to not mean, it's in theory, it's supposed to mean anti-Jewish racism, but that's no longer what it means in any way. So I kind of, and it was my friend Justin Potter who was talking about this that I think made a lot of sense to me. We have to start to kind of separate these two things. This idea of anti-Semitism with anti-Jewish racism, which of course everyone is against, and everyone should be against anti-Jewish racism. But the people have weaponized very cynically this term of anti-Semitism to mean like almost the complete opposite. Like we're seeing in this video, there's a coalition between the anti-Semites and the Zionists. You know? It's part of the foundation of Israel, and it's part of the ongoing kind of Hasbara propaganda. This whole thing about Jews not being safe anywhere except Israel. Even Joe Biden was repeating that last week. It's in those exact words. Biden is a doofus. Semite refers to language. Okay, so then Arabic and Hebrew are like both Semitic languages. Okay. The definition of anti-Semitic specifically says prejudice towards Jewish people. It comes from the biblical character and lineage of Shem, the granddaddy mythically of Jews and Arabs, I guess, according to the Bible. This 400% claim of rising anti-Semitism since October 7th is from the ADL, de facto Israel intelligence. Yeah, and the ADL, who have specifically and deliberately conflated any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So when you look on the list of incidents that they describe, a lot of it, not to say that anti-Jewish racism doesn't exist, of course it does, but a lot of those incidents that they're describing are simply like pro-Palestinian protests. I don't know if you saw the insane thing in the New York Times when they were talking about the rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses, which, as we've seen from the lobby, is like the central plank of all pro-Israel propaganda is complaining of anti-Semitism on college campuses and talking about these Jewish students that feel unsafe and all this stuff. And like the incidents that they're actually describing is like students wearing a keffiyeh in the library, or having like a sit-in, or having some kind of talking about Israel being an apartheid state. And these are the kind of things that these pro-Israel students are claiming are making them feel scared and unsafe, and get added into these lists of anti-Semitic incidents and contribute to this narrative of rising anti-Semitism. Some students were wearing keffiyehs and it made me feel unsafe. Like that's a lot of it. That's what it is.
It was named after Herzl's Altneuland. The important Israeli metropolis is also known as the White City, displaying that Tel Aviv would be a modern,
They changed the name of
clean
a salad,
place
exactly.
modeled on European cities, as opposed to what the settlers of the Second Aliyah saw as the dirty Arab cities. And it was in this city where the settler pseudo-socialist leadership of the most important Aliyah, the second one, would make their plans for the first.
It's so racist just in and of itself, this whole trope about like the clean European cities and the dirty Arab cities is so backwards in the first place, considering that the Arab countries invented indoor plumbing while people in glorified Europe, intelligent, civilized Europe, were like shitting in buckets and stuff. Living in absolute filth. I saw a free parking sign. I thought it said "Free Palestine." We're tired. Like, it's just unbelievable. We make fun of that tweet, and we should, but that's literally like what a lot of it is. That is literally what it is. Just throwing buckets of shit out the window and being like, "Whoa, we've gotten all sick in it." And then they talk about dirty Arab cities. It's just preposterous.
Ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Theodor Herzl was not even keen on colonizing Palestine particularly. One other suggestion
Uganda?
he had was Argentina. Other ideas
another
were
one?
Cyprus, North America, Azerbaijan, or Egyptian Sinai as a stepping stone to Palestine. But British politicians, such as British Colonial Secretary Joseph Chamberlain,
Look at the British,
whom he
every
approached,
single-
rejected those ideas.
every
In an
single
attempt
fucking
to find a
horrible
place in
decision.
the British Empire that wasn't already inhabited by white settlers.
You can't have your Zionist your Zionist Jewish ethno state in Africa. We're already colonizing it. Okay, stay away. Stay away.
Chamberlain proposed a Jewish colony in today's Kenya, later called the Uganda Scheme. Although Herzl favored an area near Palestine, he eventually accepted this idea and recommended it to the 6th Zionist Congress in Basel in 1903, 1 year before his short life ended at 44. Though a majority voted for the
Finders
Uganda
keepers.
Scheme, a certain Chaim Weizmann, who had become the third most important Zionist so far, was not a fan of it. And after Herzl's death, the scientist would become the leader of the Zionist movement. In the next part, I'll explain why he was so important. Just a quick side info. As I was finishing up this video, longtime Social Democratic president of the Executive Council of Basel, Beat Jans, just became a Swiss Federal Council minister, one of 7 holding the highest executive office in Switzerland. I mention this because he held a speech at the 125th Zionist Congress last year, showing the sympathy of much of the supposed left wing in Europe with Zionist colonialism and apartheid. Now back to the main script. Now, what's the biggest problem with just declaring an inhabited area on the map your territory? Well, it's the people already living there. After the Zionist Congress declared Palestine its homestead, the Palestinian leadership naturally felt threatened, and the indigenous population of Palestine would constitute the most fundamental problem the Zionists would have to face in the coming century. Yusuf Dia Pasha al-Khalidi was the mayor of Jerusalem in 1899, compelled by a sacred duty of conscience to express his concern that Zionism would jeopardize friendly relations between the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities. He wrote a letter to Zadok Khan, the chief rabbi of France, which would eventually reach Herzl. Quote, I flatter myself to think that I need not speak of my feelings towards your people. As far as the Israelites are concerned, I really do regard them as relatives of us Arabs. For us, they are cousins. We really do have the same father, Abraham, from whom we are also descended. We have almost the same language. It is these sentiments that put me at ease to speak frankly to you about the great question that is currently agitating your people. He spoke of the pure folly of Zionism to plan to take over Palestine, concluding with a plea, in the name of God, let Palestine be left alone. In the typical colonialist manner, portraying colonial conquest as benefiting everyone, Herzl replied to him, quote, "In allowing immigration to a number of Jews bringing their intelligence, their financial acumen, and their means of enterprise to the country, no one can doubt that the well-being of the entire country would be the happy result." Colonialism can only be understood in tandem with the inevitable violent contradiction that arises with the colonized. Today, Israel and its supporters around the world deny at every point the very meaning and essence of the urge to resist. Any pushback by Palestinians is
I remember
simply
when that
deemed as
video, that
terrorism,
clip.
whether it's Hamas rockets.
Remember when that clip went viral in the early days of the Ukraine conflict? They're like, look at this brave Ukrainian girl. This brave Ukrainian girl attacking one of the orcs. And it's like, oh, that she was actually Palestinian. It's like, oh, fucking forget it then. Who cares?
Palestinians is simply deemed as terrorism, whether it's Hamas rockets or a little boy throwing stones at tanks. Any act against the occupation
Who's the
is
occupier
thus
and who's
depoliticized.
the good guy
It's
in that
merely
one, in
an
that
act
picture?
of rage and the desire to murder Jews. The early Zionists did not do this. To them, it was essential all Zionists understood what the indigenous population wants in order to prepare the conquest of its land. As aforementioned Zionist Zeev Jabotinsky put it, quote, "Except..."
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, I am on every day. I'm on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Glad you could join today. They saw she had the lighter colored hair. That's all. That's exactly right. Yeah.
For those who were born blind, the moderate Zionists realized long ago that it is utterly impossible to obtain the voluntary consent of the Palestine Arabs for converting Palestine from an Arab country into a country with a Jewish majority. My readers have a general idea
That's
of the
why there's no
history
right of return.
colonization in other countries. I suggest that they consider all the precedents with which they are acquainted and see whether there is one solitary instance.
That's why
of
as long
any
as Israel exists, there's going to be
colonization
no
being carried
right
on
of
with the
return ever for
consent
anyone,
of
even if
the
we were
native
born in
population.
Palestine.
There is no such precedent. The native populations, civilized or uncivilized, have
When hours are you on? I start every day at, maybe not every day. Sometimes it's a little late. But it's supposed to be noon Eastern, and that's 1 a.m. Pyongyang time, if you're on Pyongyang time.
always stubbornly resisted the colonists. This is equally true of the Arabs. They feel at least the same instinctive jealous love of Palestine as the old Aztecs felt for ancient Mexico and the Sioux for their rolling prairies. We may tell them whatever we like about the innocence of our aims, watering them down and sweetening them with honeyed words to make them palatable, but they know what we want, and they will persist in resisting as long as there remains a solitary spark of hope that they will be able to prevent the transformation of Palestine into the land of Israel. The members of the Zionist organization would meet many times in order to commence the establishment of the institutions that would one day form the modern Jewish state of Israel. One such crucial meetup was the Second Zionist Congress in 1898, exactly 1 year after the first one, again in Basel. The three-day Congress established the Jewish Colonial Association, incorporated in London a year later, whose chief aim was to fund the successful migration of Jews to Palestine. Notice how several of these structures had the adjective colonial in it, something that Zionists would never mention today, where colonialism
Now it's anti-Semitic to suggest that there's colonialism involved in the whole process.
They later therefore had to rebrand it, calling it Bank Leumi, which is now the biggest and most powerful bank in Israel, with offices in the US, Switzerland or China. Herzl had big plans with such an organization, inspired by his The Jewish Company in the Jewish state, which, under the protection of England, would control all land in Palestine and transport millions of people there within a few years. There were two other important things happening in this Congress. The first was the presentation of an early prototype of today's flag of Israel. The other thing was something that no one could predict at the time would have a seminal impact on the history of Israel. It was the arrival of the first delegates of the so-called socialist Zionism, which will be the topic in the next part. This tendency was to become the most important Zionist current, dominating the history of Palestine for almost a century, giving Israel, to this day, the veil of democracy and progressivism. At its helm the most important Zionist in history.
So many similars with
leading
Canada,
Israel
like
for
similarities with Canada as well. The way it's been given this like progressive or liberal sheen to like pinkwash, as it were, the genocide of indigenous people that led to us like taking this land. Very like so much like it's not a surprise why Canada supports Israel so much, because there's so many similarities. You know, giving this kind of specifically kind of like progressive sort of value system grafted onto the mass murder and the ethnic cleansing. Yeah, they're trying to be Canada, but faster. Exactly. Like, let's speed up the whole process by a couple centuries.
for 4 decades.
Yeah, watching
bastardizing
Manifest
socialism
Destiny in real
in
time,
the name
exactly. With
of the
modern
superior
weapons.
nation.
With modern weapons and with social media and modern camera technology as well. So we're seeing the ultimate example of the brutality of it in full view.
Culminating in the planning of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The beginning of the to this day never-ending catastrophe named by Palestinians the Nakba.
I mean, you can, again, we've talked about it before, but you can imagine like a future Israel if they were successful in their ethnic cleansing project, doing like Palestinian land acknowledgements before big sports matches and stuff. You know, like you can see it. You can like you can see it so easily. And then having Palestinian communities being like, "Can we have clean drinking water?" And then being like, "We're working on that, and we can't quite figure it out, but maybe eventually, maybe eventually." But don't worry, the genocide and everything was a thing of the past. It was a big mistake. It was a big mistake from the past, and we've learned from it, and we've moved on. You know? All the same sort of justification, the same sort of rhetoric. Anyway, that was a really good video from Bez D. Marks. I'm going to post the link to that in the chat. Make sure you subscribe to Bez Marks's content. He does do a lot of good historical-oriented videos like this. Oh God. And at the same time, there's almost, not entirely, folks, not entirely. There's almost, though, a sick part of me that wants to watch this video after, from the Ayn Rand Institute. Did Israel steal Palestinian land? Debunked, it says. Debunked. I'm not going to put myself through that. I'm not going to put you through that, though, as well. Israel will start to look outside its borders when the time comes. I mean, if the most fervent Zionists right now, Netanyahu and all his fucking buddies, they see a greater Israel that involves taking more land from Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt and Syria as well. Like, they're pretty open and honest about this, you know? They're not shy about talking about this.
This news is
Just looking to see what Democracy Now! Has for us to take a look at. This should be a good follow-up.
We are going to turn.
This is I got a video next. This will probably be the last thing we'll look at before we wrap up today. We got breakthrough news, the freedom side. This video. When people are occupied, is resistance justified? With Ben Becker, who I imagine is Brian Becker's son. I imagine. Must be. It's the family business. Let's take a look at that. Just looked it up. It's actually Walter Becker's son. Oh, okay, good. Everything's coming full circle. Once again, folks, remember if you do enjoy this program, please subscribe. Also subscribe to Bez D Marks and Breakthrough News. Obviously, I'm going to link this in the chat right now. This video, if you're not following them, vital resource in our efforts to understand all of these ongoing geopolitical situations. But if you can, please support TRRS by subscribing. I'm halfway to the sub goal today, doing good. Like Dakadoon pointed out an hour or so ago, it's a marathon, not a sprint. If you can, please subscribe to the show. It really helps me out. We become friends. It supports the show. It supports the community. It allows me to keep doing it every day. Please subscribe if you can. I'd appreciate it a whole lot.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you very much, Diego. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the gifted sub. Very, very kind of you. Thank you. Okay. I can do this. Here's our friends Eugene and Rania, both of whom have been guests on this show. Very proud to have had both Eugene and Rania on this show. I absolutely do need one of those Panera lemonades. I would love that, actually. And if it kills me, all the better. Here's Rania and Eugene.
Turn the page to some of the more controversial issues as it concerns how the issue of what's been happening vis-a-vis Palestinian struggle for liberation in the past couple months has affected the conversation about who to support, how to support them, what's right, what's wrong, and how that all looks. And for that conversation, we are very happy to be joined here by the editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News, Ben Becker, who is partially joining us for other reasons because he recently wrote an article called Building a Real Left, Not One That Condemns Resistance and Is Without Palestinians, which you can find on liberationnews.org. Dr. Ben Becker, thank you for joining us here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, very good to have you here. I guess my first question I'll always ask, I read the title, Building a Real Left, Not One That Condemns Resistance and Is Without Palestinians. What led you to write this article?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that in a way we've been in a moment where we've seen mass unity on the left. And the last month and a half in particular, where we've seen people in the streets almost every single night. And I think, that's been amazing. I've been part of that. Many others I know who watch the show and organize have been part of that, seen this truly mass anti-war movement that's growing really in defense of the Palestinian people, when it's so obvious that who the occupier is, who the aggressor is, that who the colonizer is, sort of the moral clarity has been there in these last 6 weeks, especially of bombardment, siege, genocide. But that does not mean we should forget that there was an initial period of, I would say, considerable confusion, even among people who are leftists, progressives, who theoretically and abstractly stand with Palestine in all times, especially right after October 7th, where there was sort of this thing where people were putting an equal sign between the two sides, condemning both sides, saying they support sort of the Palestinian right to resist in general. But then when it has any concreteness, they were running away from it very quickly.
Once
in
I stop
particular,
getting
Naomi
invited onto the
Klein,
media,
Michelle
then I don't want
Goldberg,
to
some
talk
of the
about that
leading
anymore.
sort of lights of left liberal politics, I would say more liberal than left. And, it's not just a matter of setting the historical record straight, which I think has value in and of itself as a historian, but also I think because we could be entering a new phase of the Palestinian struggle where it's not just about one side being on the receiving end of bombs, but this could actually intensify into a more regular and intense war in which there are counteroffensive, in which other countries in the region, not to mention the Palestinians, are striking back at Israel. There could be more fighting in the West Bank. There could be more fighting in 48. And if that happens, we don't want to return to that moment of confusion where everyone runs away and says, well, all sides are bad and this is a complicated thing. And, I'll stand with Palestinians only if they are committed to civil disobedience.
You're seeing
that's
something else
nonviolent.
kind of insidious that's worth pointing out as well, is there's this effort also on the part of some people, and who knows what their motivations are, but there's a lot of of course we need to stand with Palestine, just like we need to stand with the Kurds and the Uyghurs and every other person that's under this kind of occupation and needs to just have the right to resist that. And it's like, whoa, maybe let's back up a little bit there. And you see how that can sneak in a kind of imperialist analysis under the guise of this kind of anti-colonialism. We need to support the Palestinians, and we also need to support these ethnic groups that have been used by these reactionary Western imperialist forces to try and destabilize their common enemies. I've seen a couple of these
Which, of course, the
incidents so
Palestinian
far.
people, and this is what my article goes through, have a long tradition of trying many different tactics. It's not like the October 7th was the first attempt to sort of strike back at the colonial occupation. When they went in the Great March of Return, nonviolently, they were shot down. So the people who came on October 7th really returned to the same places where their nonviolent protests of the Palestinian people had been repressed, and this time they came with arms.
I mean,
so
it's not to get too bogged down in this, but it's just really simple. You see, the American government supports this idea of the Uyghurs and creating a East Turkestan ethno-state for the Uyghurs. If the United States government supports it, and if the forces of imperialism supports this idea and encourages this idea, that's a good sign to indicate to anybody that these struggles are not linked in any way. The struggles of the Palestinians with the struggles of these Western-backed reactionary forces. It's not all just one and the same. You just look at where and this is where the materialist and the Marxist analysis comes in handy, right? Look at where the forces of imperialism are operating, and you know which of these struggles to support. When the forces of imperialism are backing one of these struggles, that's a good indication that it's not the struggle that you should be joining yourself, or to suggest that there's any kind of link between these two things.
I think it's important to review some of the history that we've just been through the last 2 months,
not to support
because the
Ukraine
next
in the
few
Ukraine
months
war.
or years could be a phase of actually more intense war.
If we're arming them and supporting them, it's a good sign that we should not support them.
Refer to a poll here to
It's easy.
not
It
just
actually
back
is
up what
easy.
you're saying, but then
Never
to
trust the
get your
imperialists.
response. There's this poll by a very well-known and highly respected polling outfit. It's called the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. And it conducted this poll during the week-long pause back in early December in Gaza, Jerusalem, and the West Bank. So it's not all Palestinians, but it's a pretty good I guess thermometer is the right word of general Palestinian opinion in these places. And the majority of respondents, 81%, said they believe Hamas's attack on the October 7th was a response to longstanding Israeli attacks on Palestinians and their holy places and aimed at releasing prisoners. More importantly, the majority, 72%, believed the decision to launch the attack was the right one despite the costs. And that's actually, that goes up to 82% in Gaza and then 82% in the West Bank and 57% in Gaza. Popularity of Hamas has gone up with 72% saying they're satisfied with the role of Hamas right now. And then 11% saying they're satisfied with Mahmoud Abbas, who the Palestinian Authority leader that the U.S. is supporting and also trying to give control of Gaza to. But anyway, sorry, I won't ramble on too long here. I just want to get to something very, very important, which is when we're talking about the issue of Palestinians and what to support and who to support. The number supporting armed struggle in the West Bank is 68%, which has doubled in the last 2 years. And then 69% overall support a return to armed confrontations, which is up 11% from September. So, I'm just curious, Ben, after hearing some of those numbers, like, how do we take those numbers and understand them in the context of how we are supposed to be talking about Palestine on the left, given the sort of like wishy-washy stuff we saw after October 7th?
Yeah, I think these are crucial poll numbers that everyone should familiarize themselves and in a way memorize. It doesn't mean that we from outside have to say, well, if I were Palestinian, how I would have responded to each one of those poll questions. You're not obligated to support this or that party or this or that tactic inside of Palestine from the outside. But you are obligated to grapple with those numbers. You are obligated, actually, if you're a serious activist, to try to get to that question. Why is it that the support for armed struggle has gone up it's doubled in the last couple of years? Why did that happen? That's not because Palestinians are prone to violence and,
this is the logic, right? When people try to hold this kind of like contradictory viewpoint, Palestinians good, Hamas bad. Palestinians support Hamas. What's that? What's that then? What's the last conclusion? That's an incoherent viewpoint that people are trying to articulate. And that's a good point, I think. You don't need to support anything, but like you should grapple with that and try to understand that.
Just love the gun and have a, sort of a romantic view of it. These are people who have lived through the worst forms of occupation, expulsion, displacement, and genocide, and have seen that only intensify. They've seen Israeli politics move further to the right. They've seen the international community and all the sort of treaties and promises of all these types of solutions all fall by the wayside. That's why people have arrived at this. And those numbers about support for Hamas on October 7th, that again is not that Hamas has not always been as popular as it is right now. So we have to grapple with that. If we're serious about building a left that involves the people who are under the gun, the people who are under occupation, we have to really understand the sentiments that are driving that community. And that's why if you get up and you condemn...
It's like Malcolm X said when Malcolm X was talking about the Mau Mau uprising, saying they might engage in an attack and you might think that it looks offensive, but really it's defensive. Really it's in retaliation because they're occupied. That's when I saw this fucked up community note on Twitter saying like they described there's a student group in Colombia that described October 7th as a counterattack. And then there's this community note on Twitter being like, actually, the counterattack describes Israel's actions since that time. Because that's the whole like Clinton logic thing. There was a ceasefire before that and all this bullshit. But that Malcolm specifically says when he talks about that Mau Mau uprising, it might even look sometimes like they're going on the offensive. Really, they're occupied. They're victims of colonization. It's by definitionally, it's a counterattack. It's defensive.
The resistance. You condemn all the things that 70 to 80 to 90% of people are supporting. You're going to build basically a left of the West that doesn't include the Muslim and Arab community in particular, but also other colonized peoples, nationally oppressed peoples in the United States and around the world. This is the sentiment that's been growing in the global South as a whole. So the question is the left in the United States trying to build sort of a abstract and pure, politics around basically saying, well, we're against occupation in the abstract, or are we trying to actually unite with the social force, a huge section of humanity that's rising up right now? And of course, some people say, well, you can't build respectability if you in the United States or Western politics, if you speak like this. But the question is always respectability among whom? I'm for being respectable. I want our politics to be respected. But are we trying to get respectability among a tiny section of the ruling class of this country, the liberal section of the ruling class, which of course is against
Here you go,
Palestinian liberation, no matter what tactics they take, has
Please
never
subscribe to Breakthrough
put,
News. They're just
put
their
any skin
content's
in the
absolutely
game
fantastic.
in defense of Palestine. In fact, has always formed a kind of like left-wing cover for Israel? Or are we trying to build respect among the broad working class of this country and of the global South? So yeah, like I think that's our true audience. And that was really the point of this article I was writing. And it's something that's actually recurred in many different struggles back to Vietnam, even before Vietnam.
I believe.
Like, are we just for peace in the abstract, or do we actually believe that the Vietnamese people, have a right to their own homeland? So in the anti-war movement in the 1960s and 70s, this was a big debate inside the movement. Are we just for peace, or actually are we saying that the U.S. has no right to be there and that this is Vietnamese land? So actually, victory to the National Liberation Front. That became a big slogan on the left.
So many stories in mainstream media, like the New York Times as well, during Vietnam, about the atrocities of the North Vietnamese intentionally targeting civilians and doing all the bad stuff, And then remember the clip from fucking... why do I never remember this fucking guy's name? The CIA guy. I talk about this guy so much and I forget his name each and every time. I'm getting so old to be talking about this stuff. The guy. John Stockwell. Not John Stockton, the point guard for the Utah Jazz. But the stories about the atrocities, specifically like rapes that happened. And he openly talks about it in Angola. As the CIA station chief in Angola, planting these news stories about Cuban atrocities in Angola and Cuban soldiers committing rapes. And it's the same strategy. You still see all the exact same strategies being employed. Stockton is crazy for his own reasons. That's right. He's probably super pro-Israel. If you ask John Stockton his stance on this, I'm sure he would give an assist to the Netanyahu government. But you still see it's the same strategy. I mean, it'd actually be really interesting sometime to look at I know I saw a tweet about this, but stories in the New York Times in the late 60s, early 70s about North Vietnamese atrocities against civilians in Vietnam. So many such stories. And all the exact same narrative, the exact same strategy.
1960s and 1970s of U.S. youth. And I think a similar thing could be happening right now.
I'm trying to remember Stockton's, and now I remember the guy. Next time we talk about this.
I think those are all very important points and crucial to understanding this. And I mean, it also, I think, speaks in terms of an orientation perspective, at least from the United States. Like,
you can count on me.
Who is the owner?
Good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Lenin's Lament, a.k.a. Barry, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate it.
So on. I mean, to maybe just sort of pick up on your historical example, this is actually something that was once posed to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about the issue of Vietnam. And people say, well, how can you support the National Liberation Front and the South Vietnamese because they're committing all these atrocities?
There it is.
And, they're committing all these atrocities. And, then as now, a lot of those atrocities were not real, but, it's war. I'm sure things are happening. But his response was, this is not random. That this is, in fact, only happening because the United States is preventing the Vietnam from emerging from colonization. So what's the point of sort of empty denunciations if you don't actually address the cause of what's actually taking place, and that is the U.S. occupation, and thus the U.S. war in that sense. And so I am going to oppose the U.S. war in Vietnam, which is the best way to actually bring peace and justice to the area. So in a way, also raising the issue that, is it also the job of people in the United States to just be, constantly telling other people what to do, as opposed to looking more specifically at the role the country they have the most influence in is playing in the conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is really a U.S.-Israeli war. I mean, that we should always keep saying that Israel would not be able to do this at all were it not for the U.S. support. The last few days, Biden has been trying to put distance between himself and Netanyahu. He's trying in a way to throw Netanyahu under the bus in certain aspects of the far-right government. He understands how his support for the Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people is probably going to tank his 2024 election. So he's trying to create a narrative. So for the next 9-10 months, he can say, well, I was always trying to minimize civilian casualties. I think it's far too late for that. I don't think anyone's going to buy it, but it's what he's trying to do. And I think it's very important we not let him get away with that.
This election is just going to be an absolute disaster.
Emphasize that if it were not for the U.S. support for this war and support for Israel, really the occupation as a whole would collapse. And, it doesn't, we're not saying that, again, if you were Palestinian, how you would have to vote in the West Bank or Gaza Strip. But we should point out this particular fact, that Hamas is obviously among the most popular party right now. Marwan Barghouti, who's from Fatah, is imprisoned in Israel. He actually is the most prominent and most popular political figure in Palestine. The Palestinian factions across the ideological spectrum have been trying to reform a national front. That's what's different from the Vietnam era, where you had the National Liberation Front, which obviously represented all the national liberation forces. There's been a conscious effort from the U.S. and from Israel to keep the Palestinian people divided, keep the Palestinian factions divided. And is it our place in the United States to pick and choose which Palestinian group is valid, which one is credible, which one needs to leave the country? That's the new thing. How are we going to get Hamas to leave Gaza? How is that the U.S.'s role? I mean, that's worse than the world policeman. You're actually going to try to displace the most popular party in a area and try to make it leave the whole country. I mean, what gives the U.S. the right to do that? Imagine if another country were to say, well, given the threat that Joe Biden has posed to the whole world, or Donald Trump or Barack Obama's posed, we actually think the Democratic Party would has to relocate its entire leadership to a different country. I mean, when you actually put the shoe on the other foot, the absurdity becomes so clear. But this is the kind of anti-imperialist consciousness that we need to be hammering away at right now. People are open to it. People are fed up. People are tired with Biden and Trump together. If there was ever a time to build independent, left-wing, socialist, anti-imperialist politics, now's the time.
Ben, I want to ask you, you mentioned before.
It's one of the interesting things about this movement is that line in the sand that's being
There's
drawn.
a very real chance, though it's still less likely, it could happen that this war could spread further. I mean, it is involving, right now there's so many fronts. The main front is obviously Gaza, Palestine. That's like where the primary problem is, the primary fighting is. But you also have Lebanon. You also have Yemen. You also have the Iraqis. This is a regional issue because Israel is a problem for the region. So going back to your original point, I guess what I'm trying to ask here is how would you, I guess I'm a bit worried. Being in Lebanon, I'm a bit worried. If the front in Lebanon explodes and it opens across the country, okay, it's not Palestine anymore. It's not Hamas anymore. Now you have Hezbollah. Is it going to be denunciations of Hezbollah and condemning Lebanon? What about Yemen? You know what I mean? It's none of these groups, I think everything you're saying applies to these groups, but I just like to get your perspective on how the response should be as this war escalates.
Can't let them dictate terms to us anymore.
Fronts.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there would be a lot of confusion in the U.S. and Western left
condemn
generally
Hezbollah.
among
Wait,
certain
get ready for that
elements
to
of it.
start
And
being
by
demanded.
this, I really mean, again, sort of the liberal. I feel uneasy about sometimes calling them left. It's really people who sort of take their lead from the liberal section of the ruling class. And so they're only willing to go basically as far as they're willing to go. We've seen this over and over. In the U.S., I was an organizer with the Answer Coalition against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And there was a section of the peace movement that wanted to just say, U.S. out of Iraq, which was good. We agreed with that. That was our main slogan.
Saddam.
But should we bring the Palestinian issue into this? And even though the activists themselves said, well, we support Palestine, the main thing is in Congress, up on Capitol Hill, no one's for Palestine. So if we bring up Palestine, we're going to lose some anti-war voices in Congress. And that's the most important thing. So again, they were orienting in that direction. So I think if the war were to expand even further, you'd have a lot of arguments using the same logic, where people would say, well, we're for peace. Yes, we would obviously be for peace too, peace in the Middle East. But we wouldn't join, our section of the movement would not join in the demonization of any of the countries or parties or movements that you mentioned. Because, again, what they represent
Navy
are authentic.
has their coalition or whatever to attack Yemen. I don't think they actually will, though. The KSA oil fields will be hit hard. It seems like there's a lot of effort being made right now with the sort of U.S. security and foreign policy establishment to really avoid spreading any of this. Like they're being attacked in Iraq and Syria. Their bases are being attacked, and they're like pretending it's not happening. You have Yemen like openly hijacking these ships and like refusing to allow ships passing through this area, forming like a de facto blockade, and like they're dragging their feet. I think that's the ultimate example of how stretched thin this empire is. You know, this is not the US of like 30 years ago where they would, if their bases were being attacked, they would respond with this huge escalation. They're spread so thin in Israel and in Ukraine and all over the world. And now you have like all these axes of resistance popping up in conjunction with this conflict. Their bases are being attacked, you know, and it's just, they're not doing anything. It shows how much of a paper tiger they really are. Is anyone threatening to sanction the U.S. or kick the U.S. from the UN? I am. I'm making that threat. No one else is really in a position to, really, arguably, except for China, but China's not in that. We know that that's not really part of their strategy, kind of going that like deliberately antagonistic route. Even the strikes in Syria on U.S. bases, yeah, they're hardly talking about it. It's amazing, like honestly. It really is. Yeah, China's just allowing the U.S. empire to just like collapse in on itself. And so far, it seems like to be a pretty good bet. China's learned from the Soviets' debacle with military spending. Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah.
Authentic. They're not the only authentic, but they are an authentic representation of the political will of the people of those countries. And in this context, against Israel would really mean against U.S. imperialism. So this would be, in fact, a wider national liberation struggle. And it wouldn't be sufficient to just say you're for peace, because peace on whose terms? Like we always say it, we want peace with justice. And I think the big threat with
peace
this,
with honor.
The reason why they don't want this war to expand is because it will utterly expose which governments and which regimes and states in the region are fully in the tank with the U.S. and which ones are representing the will of the people. Because obviously the will of the people across the Arab world, the Middle East, West Asia, is with the Palestinian people. Hundreds of millions of people have no confusion about that. So if there were a wider war, I think, as you can see already, the support for Yemen goes way up because of what they've been doing. Whether or not you like it in the United States, if you're an activist, you have to know that tens of millions of people are cheering Yemen when they say they're going to have a military blockade of Israeli ships, right? And so again, it will pose the question even more sharply.
Svidler, China is socialist. If China wasn't socialist, then they would be a U.S. ally, and the U.S. wouldn't be trying to overthrow them and destabilize them constantly.
If there's a sort of a larger U.S.-Israeli Western war,
it's led by a communist party.
Resistance axis, we can't be neutral in that. We have to say that one side represents basically the colonized people trying to overthrow now centuries of colonization and national oppression, and it would be to the advantage
socialism,
of
the only
justice
way that's
around the whole world for U.S. imperialism to actually lose the war in the Middle East, for all U.S. troops to leave the Middle East, all the U.S. bases in the Middle East to be closed down. And we could take all those trillions of dollars that have been spent on pointless, needless wars that the peoples of those regions will never accept, and we can use that for infrastructure, for jobs, for education, for housing. Here in New York, we had a building collapse just a few days ago because the infrastructure is crumbling. So we have a whole
in the center,
and a whole
the center of Western capital
towards a war economy. It can be geared towards a peace economy. So we're going to have many different slogans if the war expands. But a key one, of course, will be we need money for jobs and education, not for war and occupation.
Very succinct, very well put. Dr. Ben Becker, editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News. Pretty good outlet, if you ask me. Thank you so much, as always, for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much. Great show.
That was great stuff. Here's the link again. Please support Breakthrough News if you can. Really a fantastic outlet. Very proud to have spoken to both Rania and Eugene on this very show, on this very program. That was great stuff. I can't stick around too much longer. I got about another 10 or 15 minutes. I absolutely got the 3 p.m. sleepies. Something fierce right now. That coffee helped, but it really didn't put too much of a dent into my severe case of the 3 p.m. sleepies that I got going right now. Ugh. Oh boy. Oh my goodness. As you know, folks, I'm a mere 15 subs away from the goal. I know it's barely anything. It's barely anything at all. I'm a mere measly 15 subs away from the goal. And as you know, the only way I'm able to continue doing this program is if the little number goes up every day, if the line continues to go up. So if you have enjoyed this program today, if you like to tune into TRRS each and every day, please, if you can, subscribe or support the show. You can gift subscriptions. You can rock it right up to the very tippy top of the Friendship Triangle system. That's Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. Yes, Fiddler. Honestly, Fiddler on the Roof, I appreciate your contributions in having you in the community. I don't really want to get into big extended discussion on this. It's something I've talked about a lot over the last 3 years. Maybe that's something we can talk more in depth about at a future date. I don't really want to get into, because that's a whole can of worms, talking about China's and socialist tendencies and what it means to try and build socialism in this kind of like global imperialist economic system. You know, these are conversations we've had extensive discussions on this over the last 3 years. But it is something we can get into another time, because it's something that I do like talking about and thinking about. Trying to stop myself from talking about it now, trying to stop myself from getting into it. I mean, listen, my main thing is there's 90 million members of the Chinese Communist Party, and I've never really felt comfortable being here as a Western leftist here in Canada we've never built socialism. We don't have socialism in this country. We actually live in a deeply reactionary anti-communist society, and I feel a little uncomfortable sometimes talking about people in China or any other actually existing socialist country, being like, no, you're doing socialism wrong. I feel like just that in and of itself is a kind of like chauvinistic mentality. Not that that's what you're doing currently, but that's always been kind of my view on that. And just the question, as always, that we need to, I said I'm not going to do it, and I'm doing it. The question, as always, that we need to ask ourselves is like, how do you advance from feudalism to a socialist society in a ruined country, a partially colonized country, a country that's been devastated and humiliated by Western influence, a country that lost over 20 million people during World War II in the struggle in their own civil war, and the struggle against Japanese occupation and attack. And how do you, if you get parachuted into that situation, how do you build socialism? Well, it's actually pretty difficult. It's not that easy. A country with 1 billion people, and you've got to somehow build a socialist system with those conditions. And you just look at the progression from 1949 to today, right? Have there been mistakes? Have there been contradictions? Have bad things happened? Sure. Have bad decisions been made? Yes. You look at 1949 China versus today. And especially, you get the Deng Xiaoping era and this whole opening up of the Chinese economy, and in getting Western investment to come in, even the progression from 1979 to today. To me, as a Western Marxist, I look at that progression and I say, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? I'm going to criticize that and say, like, no, you're not doing socialism properly. Like, it's pretty fucking impressive when you see the massive development that's happened, like in their own society, massive historic infrastructure projects, poverty reduction. They're getting all these other nations around the world on board with the Belt and Road Initiative. They're lifting living standards for them in these these mutually beneficial exchanges where they get resources and they're building roads and bridges and ports and hospitals and schools and water purification centers and all kinds of stuff, power plants. I just look at all this stuff and I say, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think it's like night and day. You look at pictures you look at this China's social and political situation in 1949 versus right now, and it's like, goddamn, like that's pretty impressive. And like we've talked about, if it was purely like a capitalist system, they wouldn't be reducing poverty. They wouldn't be engaging in this kind of like mutually beneficial trade deals with other countries. That's not how capitalist countries operate. To say nothing of the fact that, Marx talked about the progression from feudalism to capitalism as being progressive and a good thing. And it's all part of this process. Walter Rodney talks about this in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa as well. It's all part of this progressive process, progressing from feudalism to capitalism to socialism, and that's it. And how do you progress to a socialist system while you have the world's largest imperialist military power hovering over your shoulder the entire time? That's another question as well. How do you do that? You kind of have to get them to think that you're on board with their whole global project. And that's why you see this pivot to Asia in like 2014, is because our ruling class is like, oh shit, they're actually not on board. What were we doing? They've been building socialism this whole time right under our noses. We didn't even realize. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about that's all my views on this condensed into like a little 5-minute blurb. That's my general viewpoint. Just look at what was before, and you see the progressive transition that's happened, and just look at the comparison between 1949 or even 1979 and today, and it's like this. It's like incredible. It's like it's historic. It's hard to even imagine in our Western society where all our infrastructure is crumbling. We don't build anything. We can't build anything. We're completely handicapped by our dictatorship of the bourgeoisie and our kind of fake Western liberal democracy. We can't do shit. And just look at the progress that we're seeing there. It's incredible. Yeah, that's right, Svidler. More people lifted out of poverty than anywhere in the world at this point. These are the kind of things that I look at. And that doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that there haven't been mistakes. You look at some of the Chinese foreign policy decisions that happened in the 70s. It was a lot of bad shit happened. There was even bad stuff that happened in the Cultural Revolution, which they openly admit. When they talk about the Cultural Revolution now, they're like, some of that was not so good. Even though overall it was still a force of progress that had good consequences for many. There was also big mistakes that happened, and they're very open about talking about this. But this is my views on China and socialism condensed into one little 5-minute blurb. I couldn't let it go. Without talking a little bit about it. Yeah, that's right, Matt. You take China's numbers out of the equation, and we in the capitalist world are moving backwards. All the reduction on poverty that we neoliberals claim has been part of capitalism or part of neoliberalism is all them, China just padding the stats. That's right. Yeah, post-Soviet split China foreign policy is not great. No, it wasn't. Not at all. And there's plenty of things that we can criticize, you know? But that's my thing. That's my view on that, is just overall, you look at the overall economic and cultural progress from the time they started instituting a socialist system to today, and it's like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good to me. And that's sometimes when I think when Western Maoists talk about Deng Xiaoping being revisionist or modern China being revisionist or against what Mao wanted to do, I would like to think, we can't speak for people that are no longer with us, I would like to think, though, that if Mao could be transported from like 1975 to today and look at China right now, he'd probably say, it's pretty good. You know? That's not so bad. That's kind of how I view it. The biggest mistake the U.S. did was let China into the WTO. They literally, they sold them the rope that they used to hang themselves, as the saying goes. Like, it literally did happen. They used our own greed against us. Anyone obsessing over revisionism like that is ironically a red flag. Yeah, it is. It is ironic. Well, this is the thing. It's like when you're like a Western leftist, and we've accomplished nothing. We've accomplished nothing for generations, and we're gonna talk about what revisionism is and is not, and who's building socialism and who isn't. It's like, come on, that's arrogant. It's arrogant and chauvinist to do this. It doesn't mean we can't have criticism or we can't have conversations or dialogue about it, but like, you know, we're going to tell people what socialism is and how you're supposed to build socialism. Please. Like, and again, on the opposite side, we should be learning from them. We should be learning from the way that the successes that they've had. Anyway, folks, we made a bunch of progress, and now I'm pleased to report that we're now even closer. We're now only 15 subs away from the goal. I know we've made a lot of progress. A mere 15 subs to go. So if you can, please subscribe to TRRS. If you enjoy the kind of rants that I just went on, if you can, please subscribe. It's very helpful. Yeah, and Dr. Maggot, I agree. And this is why I subscribe to the Rob method, and I encourage other people to subscribe to the Rousseau rhetorical method. When you remain nice, even though it's harder and harder to, given the nature of existing in a political space in the West. The finger wagging is unironically shutting down those much needed conversations too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. They thought too during Hu Jintao's tenure, because China wasn't at that time taking Marxism or even the study of it seriously. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why you see, like, I understand this. I've talked about this before as well. There's a lot of skepticism about China's role in continuing to build socialism. There was a lot of skepticism, which was totally understandable in the 80s and 90s. And you see some people like Naomi Klein, for example, who's someone that I have a lot of respect for on a number of levels, but hasn't really updated her thinking from that 90s viewpoint of China and socialism, and hasn't really taken into account anything that's happened over the last 20 years, and still has this completely kind of outdated viewpoint of everything, and has refused to kind of like challenge that in any way. I've never been more terrified but more excited for Christmas family dinner. Real wild card this year. Absolutely. I'm China bad, okay? Yeah. That's what passes for discourse about this in a lot of spaces here on twitch.tv. That's why, as you know, on TRRS, I'm one of the Twitch's top China respecters. One of the very top China respecters. Not even going to dignify that with a response. Yeah, you see, I wonder if these things are linked. Oil giant BP to pause all shipments through the Red Sea after escalation in attacks on vessels in the region. And immediately, Rishi Sunak calls for permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And got there before Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is just tailing the Conservative Party on foreign policy. Absolutely pathetic shit. Pretty incredible. Well, I got to go pretty soon, folks. And again, very close now, even closer. Only 15 subs to go. Can you believe it? Can you believe the progress that we've made? I know. No, I know. Seriously. Only 15 subs to go. That's like just a few generous, heroic chatters could drag my tired ass across the finish line for today. Only a few heroic, brave heroes.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
What am I looking for here? And thank you, Svidler on the Roof. I really appreciate the gifted sub. And yeah, I always appreciate having like a conversation or dialogue. I hate debating, and I hate like...
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Bullshit that
I ain't
passes
got
for
no
conversation.
Subs, mate, but have a few bits for being a true Brexit geezer.
So I always appreciate the civil discussion about these such things. And thanks for listening to my viewpoint on this. And I appreciate the gifted sub. And thank you to Joe1 as well for the 200 bits. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that. And now only 14 subs to go. So should be no problem. Sorry for interrupting the heartfelt response. It's okay. That's all right, Joe. I appreciate the 200 bits. Thank you for that. Yep, only 14 subs to go. I picked up some cranberry juice. 33 grams of sugar in just the 8 ounce. Yeah. That's a lot. They make you think it's healthy. Cranberry juice is like healthier too, right? It barely even, it's like bitter. It's good for you. Did you hear that kids are saying chat in real life? I didn't hear that, no. Is that happening? Chat, is this real? Twitter says it's happening. Well, I think that's all I needed. That's all I needed. Oh. If chat says it's happening, it must be true. That's right. Me too, group of friends IRL. Hey, chat. I don't even talk to others about what I do in Twitch. Me neither, really. Like it's impossible to explain. It's just embarrassing when you're trying to explain it to people. Does your son ever pretend to be a streamer like his daddy? He more pretends to be a YouTuber. He really wants to be a YouTuber, and I'm still trying to resist encouraging that, even though I think eventually it's not gonna be possible. I tell people I like Twitch, and they're like, "Oh, the gaming website." Yeah. Iman likes all these nerd-ass gamer streamers on YouTube. Do you want to see the absolutely unbearable YouTuber that my son really likes right now? Do you want to see it? It's so bad. It is so fucking bad. And if you don't want to look at it anymore, well, you know how to make it stop, chat. You know how to make it stop.
This side have some colors like that, but then on the outside we can make it all this color over here. How does that look, Crystal?
Babes, it looks exactly like me.
I know, right? And then we can do the same over here. We can make it this color, then do the same with this color here, and it actually does look like you. Oh my gnar. But wait, right over here needs to go up a layer like this. Then we can make it go up one final layer so it's the same height as mine. And we're gonna have to give you your low flower bow tie.
Yes, that's what pulls me together.
I know, right? And whoa! Why does that actually look super swag? And wait,
Why
I'm
is
gonna
he
put the
always
darker ones
screaming?
over here for your eyelashes like that. Yes. Now we need to make your hair thick. And your hair is pretty much the same all around. So let's go over here and Crystal, help me out. Let's fill it all up.
All right, on it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm speedrunning it. Let's go around and we can do the same pattern, how it's one color then the next. So I'll do the sandstone and you can do the wood.
All right, race you.
The Crystal, you're not gonna beat me. I'm the fastest in the universe. Oh yeah. So let me throw that John right over here. Throw it over here. And whoop-pow, Crystal, I finished. Easy pickings. Now we have to do the top of your head, which we can just make out of the red sand.
All right, baby, let's do it.
I'm going. And wait, did you finish all of yours? And oh, you have two more. Nice.
And now I'm done.
Oh, nice job, Crystal. Let me fill up the top of your head just like this. Yeah, easy pickings. And something looks off about you, Crystal.
It's because my hair is so short.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Your hair goes down your body like this. So let's make it go down over here. And this is Crystal. This is literally the Crystal I know. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Yes. And then we have to go to the back and make your hair go to your booty butt. Wait, turn around.
All right, there.
Oh, nah. It goes literally all the way below your booty butt.
Yeah, my hair is really long. I've been growing it forever.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, so let's make it go right over here next to your booty butt. And Crystal, fill it all up.
All right, I'm filling it up.
Yes, sir, Skit. Wait a minute, Crystal. I have a very important question.
What's your important question?
Does your hair smell like booty butt since it's always next to your butt?
Hey, babes, don't ask a girl that, but yes, it does.
Oh, no.
Classic Crystal.
Turn around. I think. Oh, yeah, you do have flowers. So let me put a flower right over here. And wait, do you have any more? I got the two here. And you have one on the back of your head. I knew there was an extra one. So let's put
I try not to freak out over this kind of stuff. I try not to the kids are going to like stuff. You're not always going to understand it. You might find it kind of obnoxious or irritating, but he likes it. I'm not going to get all heavy handed over it. This stuff actively is this is harmful. This is
You can count on me.
This is
You're gonna have
actively
good old
harmful.
Rob to talk you through all this.
I'm confident they're not chuddy. Yeah, I think that's at least something we can hold on to. No, my hair does not smell like booty butt. No, it does not. Comrade Bushy, thanks for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that, Comrade Bushy. There's so much worse on YouTube than that? Probably, yeah. Probably. This is pretty fucking bad, and it's just bad to listen to. I don't know why they have to yell all the time. Why are they always yelling? You know? Fucking calm. Just be calm. I don't need to hear this screaming, all this screeching and screaming all the time. Does your kid watch AFMAO? It's way more tolerable Minecraft content. No, maybe I can put him onto that, though. How many subs do they have? A lot. They probably make so much money from this. 2.8 mil. This video is 2 weeks old. 662,000 views. And they put out a video every single day. And they probably have a second React channel as well. Folks, I got 13 subs to go. I actually have to go soon. I have to go in like a few minutes. I got 13 subs to go. What's the name of that CBC show again? I already forgot it. I was making fun of it earlier. I don't think you do have anywhere to go. I do. I have to go pick up my kid from school. When you log off, you don't exist. I just disappear. About that. Yeah, that's right. I have 13 subs to go. About that. A measly 13 subs. That's right. Comment booty butt in the comments if you think Crystal is a swagtastic. They do that as well. That's a whole big part of their speech. Oh, God. Just being in that persona for that long must be really difficult. You know?
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Savage Goon, thanks very much for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you for sympathizing and empathizing with me in the kind of shit that I'm exposed to. I'll wake up in the morning and this will be playing. I'll get woken up by that voice. I'll be trying to like sleep in a tiny little bit, and I'll hear from the other room going, "Crystal!" They say, "Oh my gosh." I'd say as long as I'm not on the Mr. Beast crap, you've done well enough. He knows Mr. Beast though. He doesn't. It's only a matter of time. He knows Mr. Beast. He doesn't watch a lot of his content, but he certainly knows Mr. Beast. What do they look like? I'm not sure. Man, only 8 subs to go, folks. Only 8 subs to go, chat. Can you believe it? You should make a secret YouTube and trick him into watching it. He actually, he sometimes I can see he looks me up. He does think it's cool that I have a YouTube page. But he's not quite as interested in my videos with like VJ Prashad and stuff. He likes that I'm on there. He thinks that's really cool, but like the content is not quite the thing that you know gets him going.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Just need to be more shouty, that's right. DJ Tom Hex, thanks for the gifted sub. I really appreciate it. My 9-year-old has more subs than me. God damn it. What if you and VJ did those crystal voices? We can. The next time I interview VJ, I can put him. We can do a Minecraft thing and like build a big portrait of Mao or something like that, or Lenin, and talk about it more. Talk about everything while we're doing it, and in those voices. The cat ears are bound to help. If I put on the cat ears, do you think that'll be worth another 7 subs? Do you think that's the motivating factor that's going to get those final 7 subs to roll in? Do you think that could be it? Is it worth a mere measly 7 subs for this grown adult man to do this? You know? Is that worth a little measly 7 subs? Look at me. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. That's not 7 subs, really? That's not worth it? It's not worth it to you? Tell me more about this furry
You can
video.
count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
That's really loud. Thank you, Anon, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that, Anon. Thank you. Get a load of this guy, Cam. And now only 6 to go.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Anon coming through again. Thank you, Anon, for another gifted sub. Anon just loves cats. Only one 5 sub gifter could drag me across the finish line. Hey, what do we think? What do we think? Is there a 5 sub gifter hero out there? Drumming cat? Really? Has to be worth at least 2, for sure. It has to be. Or else I've just lost all faith in humanity, which of course I already had a lot of. As you know, as some of you old Rob heads may know, the actual song I was playing drums to in that GIF was Easy Lover. Speaking of cats, did you see the second video ever the creator of Nia Cat posted? No, I didn't.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
DJ Tom Hanks, that's very kind of you. Thank you for the 2 gifted subs. I really, really appreciate that. Only 3 subs to go. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We've come a long way. Grom wasn't subbed, I know. Unbelievable. Once again, this Swede is latent anti-Canadian racism is on display. You hate to see it. I thought we had moved beyond a world when Swedish people would be so upfront and open about their anti-Canadian racism, but apparently not. I gotta go, folks. Whoa.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Anon, thank you for the 2 gifted subs. Anon, whether there was a bunch of Anons or just the one.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Whoever you are, I appreciate you. Thank you. We're 1 away. 1 sub away. Is anyone going to be able to sleep at night if we leave the stream 1 minute from now? And the 1 sub has not been fulfilled? I know I won't. You're going to be haunted by this. You're going to be haunted by this all night, and I don't want that to happen for you.
You can count on
Anon,
me.
thank
You're gonna
you.
have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
1 slub to rule them all. Thank you very, very much, Anon, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate each and every one of you, chat. Thank you. Thank you very much, chat. Thank you to everyone that supports this program. Everyone that tunes in and hangs out every single day. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Give my regards to our friend David Tovarish. I gotta get going. Thanks so much for supporting the stream. I'll be back tomorrow. The cat ears worked. I don't know. It works. People like it. People like seeing me humiliate myself. Take care, folks.